Well, good evening, and welcome to our parent forum for our reopening plans, Tuesday, July 28th of 2020. Real briefly, I'll just review the agenda quickly. We're going to basically review the opening plans. We'll start with reviewing a full in-person plan, followed by a hybrid model plan, and then a fully remote plan. And then we will hear comment that has been emailed in. We'll be hearing from parents and the questions and comments that they've been sent in as well, that the committee can hear and take under advisement as we are trying to figure out the right thing to do here. So with that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. So I just also wanted to say that this is one of several of parent forums we'll be doing between now and the opening of school. And we will be tonight at the policy subcommittee meeting talking about a change to the district calendar, as a lot of parents, I'm sure, saw that the Department of Ed is allowing for 10 teacher training days to start the school year. So that will make us adjust our school calendar. So we'll go over that tonight, but it looks like students would be starting in mid-September, but we'll go over the exact dates tonight because it has to be voted on by the school committee. So basically the in-person model is what we have to submit one of the plans to the Department of Education that's using 3 feet of social distancing. The school committee, after several discussions and thinking about the safety and security of our students and staff, we have to submit that plan, but have decided not to go with a full in-person return to school. And we'll go through that as we go. But right now we felt we needed to stay, when students come into the building, they needed to stay at 6 feet of social distancing. I'll move through this quickly because we really want to get parents their questions answered. So bus transportation. The guidelines came out last Friday by the Department of Education. So we have buses with a 71 passenger capacity. So we would be allowed to put 23 students on those buses, and we have to sit them, put them in the seats as the way you see on the display. So one student at the aisle side, one student at the window side. So 23 students can go on a bus. That might lead us to do some staggered starts at schools and do some double runs. Per the guidelines, students living in the same household will be allowed to sit together in the same seat. That will require us to put monitors on the buses, and all students are required to wear masks, no matter what their age. They do need to wear masks while they're on the bus. That is in the guidelines. All windows need to remain open unless, obviously, there's inclement weather or really extreme cold temperatures, then the windows would be allowed to be shut. But in the when there's decent weather and cool weather, the windows need to be open. Again, all students are required to wear a mask on the bus. All high-touch surfaces will be cleaned and disinfected between the morning and afternoon runs, and obviously at the end of the day for the next morning. And already Dr. Cobbs, the Director of Operations, and Tobias Cowens, our Emergency Management Director, they're in charge of working with the bus company to make sure they're following cleaning procedures. And that goes for vans as well. Obviously, we'll have to change drop-off routines coming into school and also leaving school. Again, that will be planning staggered starts for a lot of parents who in the survey have told us that they'll be driving their students to school. So we'll have to come up with a clear safety plan for drop-offs and pickups, not only for buses, but also for vehicles who are dropping off, and also for our walkers as well. And that will be the same for a dismissal. So classroom setups, thanks to the hard work of the mayor's office and our CFO, Aldo Petronio, and our facilities department, we've been able to pretty much move quickly to be able to replace large tables with desks. This is part of the PPE money, or the CARES Act money from the Plymouth County. So we were able to buy thousands of desks to replace big, bulky tables. Those are going into storage. Obviously, we're not just going to throw furniture away, but we are in the process now of getting those desks in and changing out the classrooms, so obviously we can make sure that we are at 6 feet of social distancing. Plexiglass partitions are being installed in main office and other office areas where our staff meet with students or parents. Windows will remain open in the exterior classroom and office when, to keep the air flowing. And we have purchased air purifiers for the inside classrooms that do not have windows. We will have air purifiers in those rooms. High traffic areas need to be frequently sanitized throughout the day. We are working with our custodians. They'll go through extensive training. We will increase, not by adding staff, because right now we don't have a budget, but we will increase our day coverage of custodians. So we are disinfecting often throughout the day per the guidelines. So when the classroom's empty, we have to go in and disinfect it. We have to disinfect all common areas, handrails, obviously the cafeterias. Any touchable surfaces will continue to be sanitized throughout the day. Hallways and stairways will be open to one-way foot traffic. It says that just at BHS, that's at all schools. So we'll be in compliance with egress laws, obviously, and fire laws to make sure we're in compliance. But to reduce the traffic flow and too many students be in the hallway at once, we will make sure that we have safety in the hallways and on the stairwells as well. As far as PPE equipment, this again goes to the CARES Act money. We purchased cloth masks, so 3 for all students and staff members for them to keep. We bought over 500,000 of paper masks that will be available in the building. Obviously, if a cloth mask breaks or a student or staff member forgets their mask, we'll make sure we have plenty of cloth masks as a backup. Face shields will be available upon request. Those also have been bought with the PPE money. Obviously, gloves, sanitizing wipes, hand sanitizer dispensers are being installed in all classrooms. They're automatic dispensers. We will also have additional hand sanitizer bottles as backup. They're not only being installed into classrooms, they're being installed into all the common areas, gymnasiums, all the hallways, and also in the cafeterias. And then individual student supplies, we are also purchasing those through the CARES Act money because students now cannot share supplies, so we will have those that will remain in school. And Aldo was actually working. He worked with Kim Gibson to make sure we ordered the supplies teachers need that students use. Students in grades pre-K to 5 will remain together in their classrooms for most of the day. Students in grades 6 and above will be kept in smaller cohorts as much as the schedule allows. Teacher will assign seats in each of their classroom. Seating charts will be recorded and submitted to the main office so we know where students are sitting. Mask breaks will be frequent throughout the day, and this was a lot of questions that people had about students having to wear masks all day. We need to provide plenty of time for students and staff to have mask breaks throughout the day. Responding to health concerns, and this was guidance put out by the Department of Education. So all staff and transportation providers will be trained to identify the signs and symptoms of COVID-19. Students exhibiting symptoms will be discreetly referred to the nurse's office. Each school will have a designated medical waiting room for any student showing symptoms of COVID-19. And then anybody showing symptoms of COVID-19 will not be allowed to take the bus home from school. Obviously, the nurse discreetly will work with the family. Any student or staff member who leaves school due to COVID-19 symptoms must test negative before returning to school. So safety beyond the classroom. Screening daily for symptoms. Students, teachers, family members, we all have to work together. A fever of 100.4 or above, cough, chills or shaking chills, difficulty breathing, sore throat. I mean, they're all listed, the symptoms. We would ask, obviously, for staff or students to remain home with those symptoms. In supporting our efforts at home, reinforce the importance of good hygiene, mask safety, washing hands, covering coughs, covering sneezes, and closely follow the state's restrictions for out-of-state travel. And then responding to confirmed cases, and this is with the Department of Education guidelines, but we will also work with the Brockton Board of Health following guidelines as well. Individuals who test positive for COVID-19 must self-isolate for a minimum of 10 days and can only resume public activity once they have gone 24 hours without a fever, without taking fever-reducing medications. Experience improvement in the other symptoms and receive clearance from the Brockton Board of Health before they're allowed to return. BPS will work with the Brockton Board of Health to identify and notify an affected individual with close contact. So if there's a close contact, that's somebody that contacts COVID-19, we will work with the Board of Health, the staff at the school, to identify those who've been in close contact. Students who must remain home for 14 days after being identified as a close contact will be provided remote learning, and their absences will be waived. Decisions to close an entire school or the district will be made by the district leadership in partner with the Brockton Board of Health and the Department of, the DESE, Department of Secondary Education. And also, school committee will be a part of this, the mayor's office. I mean, we all have to play a role in the district protocols as far as how, if we close a classroom, close a school, or if we have to close the entire district down. And then we are preparing now for a sudden switch. So please help us to prepare if we have to switch from a hybrid model or we go right into a full remote model because of closing. We need to also please have a plan for emergency childcare in place. Making sure you have your child's BPS login information right from the first day. Keeping your teachers' email addresses on file, participating in online training, which we'll be coming up with our parents. As we switched into remote learning quickly back in March, as you know, we weren't a district that was set up for it. So we need to spend some time training our families. I needed that for my own kids because, you know, there's so many different platforms that we use, so many different curriculum that we use. It's very difficult for us as parents to navigate through that. So there'll be training that will be provided. And we'll provide that, those training information at a later date. And then making sure your contact information is up to date at the school and at the Parent Information Center. And then we need to make sure that we are finding out the technology needs for our families, as we know that several of our families may only have one device at home and 2 or 3 children at home. We need to make sure we do our best, and we're working on that now through grants, through the CARES Act money, is to make sure that our students all have one-to-one devices when we come back in September. And that's been a big push, and I thank the school committee and the mayor's office for their support. So I'm going to have June Saber McGuire come up and talk about the different models, a hybrid model and then a full remote learning model. And then we'll go through the questions.
Personnel superintendent. We're practicing good hygiene here. So one thing that I think is important to start with is just letting the community know, both our staff, all of our staff, our families, that this plan was informed by information from you through a survey and through our district reopening team. And so we are proposing this, and yet we're also going to be looking forward to more input from the community. And so in thinking about a cohort model, we talked about putting students into cohorts by color. So we talked about green group and orange group. So if you look at the first bullet, students with the last name A through L would be placed in a green group, and M through Z would be in an orange group. We also are prepared to consider household members who may not have the same last name, and in that case, we'd be very deliberate about assigning them to the same cohort so that family members would be in the same group. We also wanted to point out that the special education department will be making decisions about additional cohorts, and that's going to be based upon individual student need and informed by parent-guardian preference and obviously health guidelines. And so we're going to look at proposed schedule option 1, and starting with A week, and I'm just going to talk about the green group for a minute. So if we look at the green group, you would see that on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the green group would be in school for a full day. So that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. On Tuesday and Thursday, that same group, the green group, would be learning from home through our remote learning platform. Again, if you look at B week and staying with the green group, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday that following week, they would be learning from home. And conversely, they would be in school on Tuesday and Thursday. If we go back and look at the orange group, and again, sticking with the cohort model, during A week, that group would be learning from home on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and in school on Tuesday, Thursday. The following week, the orange group, and I know this sounds confusing, and that's why we wanted you to have a visual model, but the orange group would be in school Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and learning from home Tuesday, Thursday. That schedule would be alternating throughout the school year or until we are all back in school full time. So that would be alternating week to week. This second option, if we look at the green group, the students would be in school full day, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and learning from home on Wednesday, Friday. Again, this will be available for you to look at, so we'll be able to think it through together. Orange group, again, learning at home, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and the following week, it would be the opposite. The difference between option 1 and 2 is mainly that you have students in school on the same days. So if you look at green group, it's Tuesday, Thursday, full day. If you look at orange group, it's Wednesday, Friday, full day, with Mondays being the alternating day. And so if we look at option 3, it is almost exactly the same as option 2, with the difference being that the Monday, alternating Monday, would be a half day of school. So option 2 and option 3 are basically the same. Only difference being the Monday would be a half day, the alternating Monday. And so reasoning for the proposed schedules, it allows the Brockton Public Schools, again on the alternating days, to provide students with breakfast and lunch to take home every day. And the other important point is that we're ensuring students aren't going days at a time without in-person learning. And thirdly, oh, we just missed one. If you could just go back. Yep, thank you. The Monday half day in option 3, the rationale for that is that it provides faculty with necessary time for professional learning. And again, we're all learning a new model together. So a daily routine, I know the superintendent mentioned this, and this is a really important point, is that we will be adopting and implementing a learning management system for all remote learning, both in hybrid, in person actually as well, and the full remote model. So students will be required daily to participate in attendance taking, so they will be required to be present. Daily work is going to be clearly detailed in our learning management system, and work will be graded in accordance to the district's existing grading policies. So as far as the remote learning model, this is a full-time remote learning model, and this will be offered from day 1 at the start of the year at the request of any Brockton Public School family. The virtual learning program, the district will be using a full remote learning option for families who would prefer to keep their children at home. The virtual program will begin on day 1, as I mentioned, and enrollment information will be disseminated. It says early August, but we're looking at mid-August. BPS employees will be assigned to providing support to our virtual learning program. And I'm having a little trouble with the mask, so I apologize to the public. This is what we all have to get used to. So technology and social emotional supports will be available to those who choose to remain at home full-time. And finally, the virtual learning program will follow the district's grading policies. short-term or long-term transition to remote learning. We all recognize that we have to be prepared to adapt to this possibility. And first of all, we want to make sure that our students are able to log on to their remote learning platforms at their regular start time. Their teachers will send instructions via the learning management system. During a long-term transition, teachers may provide both live instruction, which we call synchronous, or a video via video conferencing and pre-recorded instruction, which is what we call asynchronous. During a long-term or short-term closure, students will be required to participate in attendance each day. Grading will be consistent with the district's existing grading policies. Do we have next slide? So this, I just want to say, having a mask on, something we all need to get used to, and really speaking and thinking about our students, we'll have to be thoughtful about that moving forward. Thank you.
So we're going to jump to the questions. And again, I just want to be clear because a lot of parents have asked this question. Yes, the answer to the question is if I don't feel comfortable sending my child back to school, if it's a hybrid model or a full in-person model, which we already have said we're not going to do, if I want to keep my child at home, it's the Brockton Public Schools' responsibility to fully educate that student remotely. So that will be an option. We want to keep our students as Brockton Public School students. We do not want to lose them to virtual schools. So we would be providing that education. And a parent has every option to keep their child at home and have them full-time remote. And obviously we would provide that education for them. So we'll jump to the questions. And again, school committee members jump in anytime to answer questions as well. Or if there are any questions before we start the parent questions, we can jump in and take them.
Before we start the parent questions, I just wanted to mention, for any parent who may be watching and didn't know, if you do want to submit a question and hadn't had the opportunity to, reopening@bpsma.org is the email address that you could submit a question to if you have one, and maybe think of one after what you've heard tonight. And also, it's my understanding the YouTube live stream will have a chat feature that allows live questions as well. Yes, so if you're watching this on the YouTube live stream, you'll also be able to use chat to submit questions as we go. So I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that.
Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, if a parent wanted their children initially to be 100% at home, say, monitor the data, is there ability to, say, after Christmas break, allow the child to go into the hybrid method? Is there flexibility on that end?
Yes.
There is?
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, and there's been talk by the Department of Ed whether, if it's a parent chose to keep their child fully remote, and what about now, situation at home changes, work schedules change, and now, I really need my child to attend school. Absolutely. We would, this is a free public education, and it's our job to make sure that we accommodate parents. So if that happened, they would be allowed to return to school, either if by that time, if we're full in person or still on hybrid or whatever model we're on, they would be fully able to participate in that.
Thank you very much.
No problem. So Jess, it's hard for me to read from the questions from here. So I'll answer them, but anybody else can jump in and answer them, so.
So this first question comes in from a parent who's asking, and this is a question we received multiple times. If I have a child with asthma and he shouldn't be wearing a mask for a long period of time because that can also trigger his asthma, and I'm concerned about his safety and the reopening of school. Some parents may want their kids back in school so that they are able to work, but what about the parents who would rather have their children at home?
So again, that would be the parent's choice, and we would fully educate that child remotely. As far as wearing masks, I think we had a couple other questions about that. There are medical notes that actually will be provided for staff members and for students who, for some reason, can't medically wear a mask. That's why it was important for the school committee to decide, and with our recommendation, is to go with the 6 feet of social distance. And that's why we did not feel comfortable with the 3 feet, because, guidelines do say 6 feet. And if there's a child, a staff member that cannot wear a mask because of medical reasons, it would be important, obviously, to keep the 6 feet of social distancing.
If given the option for virtual learning, will it be a full day of learning or assignments, where will be assignments be given where the parent is then required to teach?
Virtual learning needs to be a full day. That's clear by the Department of Education. It cannot look like what it looked like in the fall, where it was almost half the school day, and we were pretty much doing enrichment activities. And then when we moved into later part of spring, we were able to introduce some new curriculum. But when we get into the new school year, it would have to be a full learning day, and we'd have to cover the curriculum as we would if we were in school.
This was a question we received a few times, and we're receiving it in the live chat. Can't we just stick to remote learning until the pandemic is completely over? I feel that my child and his teacher did a wonderful job doing everything with the laptop that was provided. I do not feel comfortable at all sending my child to school.
So that's, again, something that we'll make together with the school committee, a decision how we're going to return to school. And I understand that there are some systems that are going fully remote to start. Others are, as encouraged by the Department of Ed, is to get children back into school because of the need of that in-person, face-to-face contact with their teachers, with their adjustment counselors and guidance counselors. And we have to weigh that option, obviously, again, with the safety and security of our students and staff. And again, that will be discussed before final decisions made. And I also want to point out that we're talking about this, and today is the 28th, July 28th. So we're talking these plans on July 28th, but obviously by August 4th or August 10th or August 28th, everything could change. So we have to be very flexible on whatever we do, and things could change on September 1st. So, but again, if we do go with a hybrid model and half the students would be in school one day and the other day, you would still, as a parent, be able to keep your child at home full-time on remote learning.
What is the plan for the special needs students that can't or won't wear a mask or face shield and have a compromised immune system?
So again, this is, they would not have to wear a mask. That's obviously part of, the medical documentation that they would have. But again, this is the importance of making sure that we were able to keep 6 feet of social distancing in the classroom.
In school, kids are to wear their masks all the time. How do you see kids, elementary especially, wearing masks all day? And how is it safe for a kid to wear a mask for 6 hours?
So this was another reason that we didn't want to go with 3 feet. We need to have several mask breaks throughout the day for not only, I need them throughout the day, not only myself, adults, but especially children, our younger children. So there'd be plenty of mask breaks throughout the day, which would have to be scheduled in. So these would be part of the everyday schedule, K-12, actually pre-K to 12. And going outside, getting air, teachers taking classes outside, and again, frequent mask breaks throughout the day, which would have been very difficult with 3 feet in a full classroom. But now, again, if we go with half the students in the school and half the students out at home, then you would, there's plenty of room for social distancing and plenty of chances for frequent mask breaks.
In Brockton High, and this is again another question that we received from multiple parents in different ways. This was the first way it was posed to us. In Brockton High, when transitioning from one period to the next, there are many kids in the hallway with 4 minutes to get to the next class. How will social distancing be maintained?
So Dr. Murray and his team have spent a lot of time on this. Obviously, you would not have 4,000 students in the building. You'd have 2,000. Dismissals from classes would be staggered. And also hallways would be one way. stairwells would be one way. Obviously, we would make sure we're in compliance with fire laws, but there'd be much less students in the hallways. Obviously, there are floor teachers at Brockton High and several teachers that would be in the hallway making sure that social distancing is maintained and enforced, but obviously we would stagger dismissals from classrooms to make sure the hallways were very light with traffic.
How do you plan to protect the students and staff in the fall? Asked by multiple parents.
Again, it's making sure we have the proper PPE equipment for all students and staff, making sure that we have all cleaning supplies needed for the staff to clean the classrooms frequently throughout the day, making sure that students and staff are following, hand sanitizing, hand washing throughout the day, making sure masks are worn, making sure social distancing is kept, and enforced. So, that's the way we have to follow CDC and local Board of Health guidelines and make sure that we're doing as followed to make sure that we keep our students and staff safe. And again, this district has pretty much, and again, a support of the mayor's office and the school committee, we jumped in right away starting to buy everything we needed for PPE equipment. And we are getting all that equipment in now, where a lot of places are waiting for it because so many people were ordering plexiglass and air purifiers and the air filters needed to change out systems and the masks and the gloves and the hand sanitizer. We started ordering this pretty much, I would say in May. We started ordering this material. So that it is come April, actually. Yeah, it was in April. So we've been ahead of the game on that. So again, having the proper PPE equipment and make sure the guidelines are being followed.
If schools reopen, how often will bathrooms and classrooms be sanitized during the school day? This is a question that we also received a few times in a few different ways.
Actually, multiple times. Every time classrooms, they'll be scheduled, so classrooms are empty throughout the day where students are not in there. They would go in. We have the electrostatic disinfectant guns that we bought for the schools. There'll be several in each school. We'll go in, obviously spray down all the high-touch areas, desks. We'll be wiping down handrails, wiping down doorknobs multiple times throughout the day. Same with cafeterias and bathrooms will be multiple times. There'll be clear checklists that will be hung up that the custodians have to go through the checklist to make sure that at these times during the day that the classrooms have been sanitized, bathrooms, and all the common areas as well.
Could there be more vacation/summer school opportunities next year to help children who may have fallen behind?
That's a yes. The answer is yes to that. We actually had just applied for a Department of Education grant that will hopefully provide us with not only vacation and summer school, more opportunities for that next year, but also we might be looking at some Saturday programs as well. And those could be remotely or they could be in person, depending on the numbers. But we have applied for a Department of Education grant to increase what we can offer through our budget with these programs.
What is the threshold to determine when and if a school may have to shut down for virus concerns, and what happens then?
So if you have to shut down, that obviously will be in conjunction with the Board of Health, depending on the number of cases, but depending on the situation. And if the school shut down, that school would have to go into full remote learning and would obviously have a plan for that. Or if the class is shut down, that class would go into full remote learning for the time deemed appropriate by the Brockton Board of Health and the guidelines put forth by the CDC and with the Department of Education.
If Brockton decides to send children back in school using the hybrid model, will all kids go back on the same days, or will grades switch off per school?
In the earlier presentation, it's very difficult to switch off grades because of the way our schedules are. So we would do it by the alphabet, which we did. We would break it in half, and then also we would then look for households. So if we'd make sure we'd check the households in our infant canvas system and make sure families were going to school on the same day to obviously make sure it's more convenient for parents. it would be easy if obviously, if you have older siblings at home, if they're off the same day, they're able to be with their younger brothers and sisters. So it would not be by grade, it would be by the alphabet. And obviously by household, and we'd have to basically manage what it would look like if there's, if we're heavy on one side, we might have to, pretty much adjust to make sure, as the best of our ability, to make sure the school is pretty much cut in half as far as the population.
This spring, our classes only held 1 hour Zoom per week. Will it be different this time? Will the online facilitators have more training, support, better software, etc., to improve the experience?
The answer is yes. There'll be more training. We're picking a learning management system. The only issue here is we still don't have a budget. So we have to remember our teachers and staff will be much better trained and ready to go to remote learning through hybrid or full remote learning. But we want to make sure that every one of our students has a one-to-one device and has internet access. And that has to do with us working with the state, making sure a budget and funding comes through. And we did put a grant in through the Department of Education to even get more computers to make sure every student has a one-to-one device. So the quick answer is yes, we'll be much better prepared as far as our teachers trained, software, and a learning management system. The part that's up in the air is to make sure that we have the budget to support all this, and that's what we need to continue to push the state on. And I think today, at some point, and I didn't get a chance to see it, there are some numbers starting to trickle out from the state, so we might be able to.
The House Ways and Means is projecting a budget or funding through October 31st only.
Okay.
The superintendent is talking about budget. We passed the city budget 92, but the superintendent is talking about the state aid, which
Yep.
is our chapter 70. We have not been given a number from Beacon Hill on that yet.
Will children be penalized for challenges with wearing the mask, such as calls home, write-ups, suspension, etc.?
The answer is no. We need to work with our families and work with our children and students to make sure that they know the importance of that. This should not be something that's a penalty, suspension, demerits, or any negative, anything that you can do to penalize a child. Our reopening committee and the social and emotional learning reopening committee led by Sharon Wolder, they're working on this and how our staff will deal with working with our students who refuse to wear a mask or it's really having an issue wearing a mask. It will not be done through penalties or suspension. It will be done by working together with the families, with the student, to make sure they know the importance of it, but it cannot be a punitive thing.
How will my child be supported to ensure she is receiving a standard-based education and not remedial work?
Well, again, there's no more enrichment when we open like we did in the spring, which was allowed by the Department of Education. We need to follow the full curriculum standards and core standards put out by the Department of Education. That all has to be followed. So we have to follow our curriculum. We have to follow our pacing charts. So from K to 12, we need to make sure we are implementing the full curriculum that's tied to the standards, and there's no exception for that.
Are the staff going to be tested before reopening just for safety on their side?
No, that's not a requirement for staff or students to be tested. Obviously, people are allowed to go get tested on their own, but that will not be a requirement.
And I just want to add that we do have a list of testing sites on our homepage on the COVID-19 Family Support Center. If anyone would like to look at that, that will be up and updated all year. What happens if you do hybrid and parents have to go to work? Will there be childcare for parents who cannot take every other day off?
We are in early talks with the YMCA, with the Boys and Girls Club, to see if they're able to provide any childcare options for families. That's something the school system can't provide, but we're hoping that they can expand the Y and some of the local childcare providers can maybe expand their options for parents. So it's something that we really don't control, but we will be working closely with and do our best to try to see if the options can be expanded through the Y, the Boys and Girls Club, and other childcare providers across the city.
How will moving from class to class be handled?
Again, it will be staggered to make sure there's few students and staff in the hallways. We'll try to obviously move students together in cohorts. Like if students are going to the cafeteria to eat, they'll move in cohorts with their class. And again, very small groups. It's just not going to be the bell rings, everybody gets up and goes to class like obviously we're all used to. We'll have to move in cohorts. We'll have to move, obviously, with staff supervision. And again, it would be staggered. So the hallways would be low traffic compared to when the bell just rings and everybody passes from one class to the other.
How is my kindergartner going to be safe in a class where kids potentially won't be wearing masks?
Again, this is where we will, even though it's not mandatory for students in for K to 2 not to wear masks, or K and 1 not to wear masks, but we will encourage and work with students to do that. However, that's the importance of the district not going with the 3 feet. It's the importance of going with the 6 feet of social distancing. And again, that was a big decision. And again, that's still not decided how we're going to go back to school, but if we were to return, we would make sure that it's at the 6 feet of social distance, and that's why a hybrid model would only have half the students in the building on one day and half on the other day.
Will teachers be allowed to do outdoor classrooms, weather permitting? Is recess still going to be allowed?
Yes. Yeah, we want to try to get students outside as much as possible. That is in the guidelines. Recess would be allowed so they could go outside. Obviously, we would make sure that, the supervision's there to maintain social distancing, but getting students outside and staff outside is key when weather permits.
Will there be documentation provided to parents so they can give their employer about the new school schedule?
Absolutely. Yep, we could give that to a parent. We could have a template letter that would be made up, signed by me, that would let the employer know exactly what their child's schedule is in school.
The Brockton community cases have increased. Shouldn't that be taken into consideration if it is truly a safe time to reopen in September?
Absolutely. Yep, we continue. The mayor, school committee, myself, we talk several times a week. The Board of Health is, as you know, Linda Cahill, who is our nursing supervisor, is serving as the director of the Board of Health. So obviously we're in very close contact with Linda and spend a lot of time talking to her. And obviously the number of cases in Brockton when the time school starts will obviously be a big factor in the decision that's made.
If school will be held 100% online or blended/hybrid with part online, part in person, will additional laptops be provided to families in need? If so, how and when would families be able to borrow the additional laptop?
That's yes. Again, we're doing everything we can right now to make sure every student has a laptop, so we're at 1-to-1. So a family does not have to share those. If you have 2 or 3 children in the family, you wouldn't have to share one. So we would put a system in place. If we're not able to open school, we would have the same pickup situation that we had run by Dr. Cobbs, Tobias Cowens, and our IT department, who did an excellent job last year getting out almost 7,000 laptops and making sure families were able to bring those and have them repaired when needed. We were able to swap those out, fix those, and get those back out so there was not a delay. So a child wasn't going too long without a laptop, but we would definitely try to get a laptop in the hand of every student in the Brockton Public Schools, and that's what we're working on now through purchasing with the money through the CARES Act and also with a grant from the Department of Education, and we're waiting to hear from that. We should hear about that grant within the next 2 weeks.
Will the status of schools be reevaluated monthly, weekly, etc.? For example, if it begins as online, will it be reevaluated each week to see if students can transition to full-time or in-person learning?
I think it actually has to be evaluated daily, something we'll have to keep our eye on every day, obviously weekly, but we need to keep our eye on every school, every day. We'll have procedures in place, principals, administration letting us know what's going on in school, obviously following cases closely, the number of cases in Brockton, following cases in, where the neighborhoods are, if they're spiking in certain neighborhoods. We need to this has to be day to day. This is information that we need to keep track of and evaluate every day.
My question about the reopening of the public school is, what are you planning to do about lunchtime? Multiple parents asked similar questions.
So with if we were to go, in which we're not, the in-person model, students would be required to eat in the classroom, which would have been very difficult because when you eat, you have to take your mask off and then you have to be 6 feet apart. And if we got every student in the building, they were going with 3 feet of social distancing. Another reason we're not going with that. So with a hybrid model, students would be able to eat in the cafeteria. We'll set up the cafeteria so there'd be more than 6 feet of social distancing between students. We would change lunches. You might go to, if a school has 3 lunch periods, it might go to 4 lunch periods. Those are the kind of things we would make sure that students were able to go into the cafeteria, socially distance, take their mask off and eat. It's important. We feel with so many, grab and go lunches, we gave out cold lunches, throughout the spring, throughout the summer. I think it's important for students to eat in the cafeteria, to have a hot lunch. The students who would be if we were on hybrid, those students would be given lunch at the end of the day to take home for the next day, to make sure that, again, we are a free district throughout K to 12. So we have to provide a lunch and breakfast to every child. So when they're leaving school, so if I'm in school on a Monday and I'm not in school on Tuesday, I would be leaving school with a breakfast and lunch for the next day.
Based on the models that were presented previously in regards to the potential hybrid models, when would this allow for a deep cleaning of the school? Cleaning
has to take place throughout the day. I've seen districts that are, maybe close one day for deep cleaning. The guidelines say you should be cleaning all the time when classrooms are empty. You should be wiping down handrails, wiping down doorknobs, disinfecting classrooms when they're empty. This has to happen. Guidelines are clear. This has to happen every day, throughout the day. You shouldn't have to close to do this, because if you went by that model, then you should just only be having school every other day. So you could close every other day to clean, to let the next students back in. The guidelines say you need to be cleaning throughout the day, constantly. And not only throughout the day, so when students go home, an even deeper cleaning needs to be happening at night. So if you follow the guidelines and follow the checklist that's put out by the DESC and by the CDC, we need to be cleaning and disinfecting throughout the day, over and over again. And if you do it the right way, you should not have to close a school down to do deep cleaning. You need to do it the right way throughout the day and at night to make sure the school is staying clean.
Why are the kids not going back full-time if they have masks on and separate and have hand soap? Or maybe test kids each Monday and Sunday night each week?
Full-time, again, is an option through the Department of Education. We felt, but that was at 3 feet of social distancing. A lot of our schools could fit all students in using 3 feet of social distancing, but unfortunately students just don't drop out of the sky into their seats. We have to get students in and out of classrooms. Kids are kids. They love to be with their peers. If you have a full population of a school in, it would be very difficult for staff to supervise and maintain, and making sure students are maintaining social distancing. Kids are kids. They're going to high-five each other. They're going to hug each other. They want to see each other. They miss each other from not being in school for so long. So we just felt it was not safe with the 3 feet. We have large schools. Most of our schools are on, most of our schools are 600, 700, 1,000. Brockton High is 4,000. We just did not think, and again, school committee can jump in, that we thought it would be safe to bring back students at 3 feet of social distancing and have every student in the building at the same time. And again, you have classes of 28, you have classes of 30. Now those classes would go to 15 or 14. Some would go to 12 if there's 24 in a class. Much easier to supervise, much easier to keep socially distanced, and much safer. And we're not allowed to make sure that students are tested every week. There's really no mechanism for us to test students every week. And again, someone can drop in the mayor about Dr. Herman. He said that's really would be not really feasible, but it really wouldn't give us the information we needed.
Well, he said, first of all, because it's a public school, you couldn't mandate it, number one. And number two, the testing results take, there's been a lag, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days. So we can revisit again with Dr. Herman,
Yep.
but he made it clear to you and I that it wouldn't be feasible at this point.
Oh, and he's also, the child could test negative on a Monday, but then be positive on Wednesday. So,
Right.
it just wasn't a feasible. Go ahead, Mr. Minichella. I know you asked that question when the doctor was here.
Yeah, just to briefly talk about, why we wouldn't be going back as usual, it's the safe management of, your children. I think that we all feel that the school committee and the school administration and the mayor and the city elected officials, our role is to make sure that people are safe in our community. I don't think any of us feel that bringing back every student, opening the schools prior, under normal circumstances, that we can safely manage the school for both our students and both our staff. We're learning about this, situation, this pandemic. We're using the best information possible. We're trying to keep everyone safe. We just feel with the information that we've had that the 6 feet distancing with regard to the way children and students interact with each other is the best model. And 3 feet is just unrealistic to safely manage and staff the buildings and keep our kids apart from one another. With regard to that question, I did ask that question about the testing, and just like the doctor said, when you test someone, it doesn't mean that 2 hours after the test they're not out with their friends, their buddies, riding bikes or playing ball and drinking out of the same water bottle as we all used to do, from the same garden hose when we were kids and we did what we did, in the summertime. So, a test today doesn't mean that an hour later the kids aren't together doing something, and the test that they took an hour ago is useless. So, I guess it's just, a reality. We want to make sure that we can manage the buildings in a safe way based on the information that we all have with regard to this pandemic, and this is, I think, the best model that we feel we can do so in a safe and manageable, realistic way. It's as complicated as that.
The other issue that I think relates to that too is we had anticipated being allowed, having to reduce the number of kids on a bus at a time. And so for budgetary reasons, we are down, we have fewer buses than last year to begin with, and also have to reduce the numbers of kids on buses. So between Mr. Minicello's point about the 6 feet within the building, and also how do we get the kids to school if we were to do a full return, you can't even begin to provide the transportation in an effective way at this point.
Yeah, and you also it would take us probably 2.5 hours to get everybody into school if you had the full, with the drop, the way you have to transport, decrease in transportation, and also making sure our walkers come in at a different time, making sure cars are showing up at a staggered time to drop off. Doing that with a full school is, it would take hours to get students in school and then out of school, and a major inconvenience for families. And again, it's all about safety and security, how much easier it is to manage half of the student population. Brockton High, for an example, a school that was built for 6,000, There was 5,200 when I graduated here in '87. Now has 4,000, and obviously if a hybrid model would be down to 2,000. So just how much more space there is for 2,000 kids compared to the 4,000 or the 5,200 when I was here. And I think at one point when it opened, it was close to 6,000. So, much safer.
How will teachers and staff be able to emotionally comfort my child if he or she is having a hard day without getting close?
So, Sharon, do you want to help me answer that question? I know the Social and Emotional Committee and the Adjustment Counselors have been spending a lot of time on the part about teachers working with the emotional comfort for our children.
Well, I think the reality is things will be different, and we have to anticipate the anxiety the kids are going to. There will be times that someone is going to be comforted. I'm sure provide that comfort. It's important to make sure that the time that they spend in close proximity to a child is limited, that they do wear their mask and they practice all of the precautions that we ask them to practice, and that we learn to be able to communicate with kids in a way that allows them to express how they're feeling and their needs, but does not require touch. You want me to this one? Here you go. Speaking of not required touch, I'm sorry, Melinda, I think I touched your hand. So this is definitely a challenge, and when you really look at what it means to come back to school in such different conditions, we have to be prepared for what that means for kids in terms of what they expect of the adults, in terms of them being around each other. We are working with kids over the summer, for example, and just getting them to understand what 6 feet of space looks like, what 3 feet of space looks like. These are very challenging things. And when someone is in crisis, they don't care about COVID, they need to be comforted. And that's where instinct of adults will take over sometimes too, and make people choose to be in closer proximity. But it is important to make sure that we maintain distance wherever we can, that we use our comforting words and allow kids to express themselves in ways that let us know what the problem is, and then make sure that we, as much as we can, maintain the distance that we're supposed to.
Thank you, Sharon. And again, a part of the Department of Ed planning with the MTA, the AFTF, and the Boston Teachers Union have been meeting, and it was important to make sure that those professional development days in the beginning of school, those 10 days, were given for reasons to make sure the training is taking place not only for remote learning, but it's the importance of how we're going to welcome our kids back into school and comfort them during this difficult time. And obviously in Brockton, we have several students that suffered trauma through loss of family members through COVID-19, through the George Floyd murder. So there's a lot of social and emotional support that we need to make sure we're giving our students, and that has to, that comes with training. So that's why those 10 days is very important for us to have in the beginning of the school year.
When will families know when their children will go back to school to have enough time to prepare their child for school?
So we will have the exact return date. Tonight I will present an adjusted district calendar to the school committee, and that we have a special school committee meeting next Tuesday night, the 4th. So on Tuesday night, the 4th, there'll be a vote of actually the return date to school. And again, whether that's hybrid or whether that's remote will depend on how things move through. Again, we'll make a decision on the 4th of how we're planning to come back, but we have to continue to say that this can change at any time between August 4th And whenever we start, either September 15th, again, I don't want to say the date, we just have to make sure that we have the 170 days lined up, so that we'll go over that tonight at the policy subcommittee meeting. But we will pretty much have those answers for you on the next Tuesday night, August 4th, so families have time to plan. However, there's always the footnote at the bottom, that this is subject to change on how we open school in mid-September. That's something that is going to be ever evolving, and we can never say, like we've done in previous years, that's like school was supposed to start on September 2nd this year, and we would say that in all these years with confidence that school started on September 2nd, but this year we'll say a date when it starts, and we can plan on how we're coming back to school, and again, that all could change as we work through late summer into the early fall. So, but we do want to provide our families with enough time, obviously, to plan for childcare, and make sure that they know continue to inform them of what's going on, continue to have forums. We will provide a forum. I know we didn't want to do this first one by Zoom because it limits. We have 16, pretty much close to 17,000 students. We didn't want to have people left out, so we wanted to do it this way to start, but the next few we will have, I think we'll do it through Microsoft Teams, and so we can more interaction with our parents. So we will have those forums going in through August and also into September.
What will happen with childcare vouchers for extended daycare?
We do not have guidance yet for extended day. We're waiting from the EEC for that guidance. So at this time, I cannot tell you what's going on with extended day. We're waiting on guidance for extended day. As you know, we're waiting on guidance for athletics and extracurricular activity. They've delayed that until the mid-September, but there's no clear guidance on that yet. But we don't have that yet. But we'll get it to families as soon as we do.
Will temperatures be checked by a nurse upon entry of school? If a child is quarantined, how does this affect their attendance, and will they be required to make up work?
Temperatures will not be checked by the nurse on every student coming into school. That is not a requirement. However, obviously, if a child is feeling ill and sent to the nurse, their temperature will be checked. If a child is quarantined, their attendance, they obviously would be marked absent, but that's a waived absence. However, if we have to switch to then they switch to remote learning, they would be marked present. So the absences would change to being marked present, because for the quarantine, for how many days they need to quarantine, usually 14. So if that's 10 school days, those days the child would be marked present, and they would be given remote learning for those days that they're at home. And that counts as being present in school.
So just procedurally, we have to, we're actually already running a little late with starting policy.
Oh, sorry, Matt.
No, that's all right. So, what we can do is we'll start policy, and then the committee could take a vote to suspend so that we can continue hearing the comments and questions from parents. If that's all right. So, okay. So I'll call to order the July 28th policy subcommittee meeting of the Brockton School Committee. Do we have a motion to suspend? Does this need a roll call? Okay. All right. Motion to suspend properly seconded. All in favor? Yeah. Yeah, so we would suspend till we can, finish hearing tonight's questions and comments from parents, and then we will go back into policy and, go forward with the agenda of our policy subcommittee meeting. So, all right, thank you.
We're ready to start back? Yes.
If I opt for remote learning for my own child while the BPS district has chosen an in-person or hybrid model, will my child have access to the teacher's curriculum and instruction, or will it be a generic third-party vendor?
We're hoping to do all this in-house with our own teachers. It depends, again, on the numbers. It depends on the planning. But it depends on the number of students that will choose full remote learning. But we have every hope to be able to do this with our teachers. If you're on full remote learning, obviously you wouldn't have the teacher. If you're in school in hybrid and then you choose to go to a full remote, you wouldn't end up keeping that same teacher, because obviously that teacher would need to continue to teach their class in the hybrid model. But we have every hope that you would have a Brockton Public Schools teacher. There are situations where there would be a third-party vendor. As you know, we use Edgenuity. Some students and families it worked well for. And if it worked well for them and they wanted to keep that option, they would keep that option, and we would have a Brockton Public Schools either administrator or a teacher that would monitor the progress on a third-party vendor like Edgenuity. But again, we're hoping that if there's full remote, we're able to do as much as that as possible with Brockton Public Schools teachers.
If students are attending a school for only a portion of the week, how will student athletes consistently be present to participate in practices, games, and workouts?
So if we are allowed to have athletics, again, it is scheduled to start. It's been delayed to September 14th. Students who are not in school that day would be allowed to return to school at the end of the day and take part in practices and participate in games, workouts, and practice. That would be allowed if we're allowed to have athletics or any extracurricular activity. If we have a club, if we're allowed to have any of that, then we would allow students who are not in school that day to come after school. Obviously, it would be providing their own transportation, but they would be allowed to return after school and participate in extracurricular activities.
If a teacher is out sick, how do kids get their assignments?
It would be through either substitute teachers or through other teachers that are assigned to assist the teacher that is out sick. That will be scheduled, and we'll work on, Kim Gibson and I have talked a lot about this. It's a moving target. We have to see, obviously, to teachers that are returning. Teachers, there are certain teachers that will be working with a remote model, so we'll have to be very crafty on how we schedule and how we pair up teachers to work together to make sure students are getting what they need. And also there's administrators and other positions that are certified in buildings. They will be assigned also to help when teachers are out to make sure that students are getting what they need and making sure they have full access to the curriculum.
I also wanted to point out with an LMS, it would be published in the LMS. So all students will be able to see and all parents can see all assignments.
Thank you, Ethan.
My daughter will be in grade 5 tag. If I choose not to send her and do remote learning, will she lose her spot in the program?
That we would say no. I don't want any students to lose their spots in programs because of being. As you know, with the district, the approach we took in the spring, where we didn't fail any students. We did everything we could to make sure our students stayed engaged and were successful. We did not want this pandemic to punish or to hurt a student anyway academically, and that would continue. That's the practice of the Brockton Public Schools. It's the philosophy of the Brockton Public Schools, from the school committee to the superintendent to the executive team to our teachers and all staff, is that students will not be punished because of this pandemic at all and lose out on things. We can't help what's canceled as far as sports and those things, which obviously are very disappointed. If those things do get canceled, then those are the things we just can't help, and we feel terrible about if they are canceled. However, students will not be punished or lose out on things that we can control because of this pandemic, and that's been the practice ever since we closed on March 12th.
What are the plans for students involved in JROTC? Will there be a time scheduled for participation on return?
So classes for JROTC would stay, and obviously those classes would continue, the program would continue. Obviously the drilling that's done and the what's done after school and in the gym, those things obviously look different, obviously because of guidelines and social distancing, but their classes would be taking place. If we're in school in a hybrid model, they would obviously be half and half, which might help us be able to do some of those, the drills and activities that JROTC has to do as well. Again, we'll follow the guidelines, but JROTC will be offered, and those classes will take place if we're in school, obviously, and they would take place remotely as well.
All right, and I have a few questions that have come in from the YouTube live chat I'm going to share with you. So a few parents have been asking about penalization for absences. If they have to keep their child home because they are symptomatic, how that will work with absences.
So there'll be no attendance policy that would fail students for not being at school, obviously. However, we do have to take attendance, students that are in remote learning and the students who are in the hybrid model. So obviously with our new learning management system where students would be homesick, but they're following along with the curriculum and what the teacher has assigned, those students would then be marked present. So, that's something that we can clearly do through the guidelines. So the teacher does have to take attendance, and obviously if a student is home participating, just like they would be in the hybrid model or full remote model, then they would be marked present. And there would be there's no failing anybody because of an attendance policy.
The next question we have is, can parents switch to in-person if they're in the virtual learning program and it's not working out for them?
Yes. Yep. Again, this is a free public education that we are obligated to give all Brockton Public School residents. So if situations change, a parent chooses full remote learning, but obviously things at the house change, job situations change, or they're just not working out for the child, they would obviously be able to come back to school. Again, in the model we're going with, either with the hybrid model. Or obviously they would stay remote if we had to, if everybody had to go remote.
And then a few parents have also asked, will you still offer the meal grab-and-go program if families choose to keep their children home?
Yes, we would have to come up with a location for that. I would have to work closely, obviously due to traffic, and we'd have to figure out what schools, but we'd make sure still that we would have those throughout the city to make it convenient. I don't know if we'd have 10, but would make sure that we would cover each side of the city, and also the center part, the central part of the city would make sure that we had that available for students that choose to say full remote.
A few parents have also asked about support for AP and IB classes. How will they be supported in a hybrid or full remote model?
Dr. Murray, we are investing in a program to help support those students with their teachers as well, correct? With regards to? AP and...
So we've actually got all of our AP teachers are currently...
Get the Merv Griffin microphone.
Thank you. Watch it. We've actually had stuff ongoing since the spring. Our AP teachers are currently involved in a specific special training for virtual instruction for AP students. We've also continued to partner with Mass Insight so that this training can not only be provided to the teachers that work with our AP students, but also with all of our other students. This way, we feel like we can provide the kind of quality instruction that they deserve and want. So.
Thank you, Dr. Murray.
Thank you. And then the next question, kind of spinning off of that, is the two-way programs and how those will be handled in the same format, whether we're in hybrid or full remote model.
So we would obviously work with those teachers, and again, part of the 10 days before we come back to school would be the training for the two-way program, and we want to provide that opportunity, whether it's hybrid or remote. We would be providing that for. It's an obligation by the school department. That is a program we have, and we have to pretty much make sure that even in a remote setting, that we're supporting that program and those teachers and those students.
All right. And then last question, everyone's favorite subject, MCAS. What about MCAS? Is that still going to happen?
As of right now, we don't know. That's something that a lot of people are pushing the state to not have next year. That has not been a commitment by the state to say they're having it or not having it. It's just pretty much, that's a subject that I think they'll leave for a little bit later in September into October. The testing takes place, into the spring, so I don't think we're going to get an answer on that anytime within the next month or two. But obviously, we'll make parents aware. I know that there are several organizations that are pushing back pushing against the state to get not have MCAS next year. Some people are pushing not to have it for 2 years. So that's to be determined, I would say.
Great. And I think that's everything we haven't addressed. One thing I do want to add is a few parents have asked about special education, and there is a special education CPAC meeting tomorrow evening. That information for the Zoom that they'll be hosting is on our homepage, bpsma.org. If you go to our calendar, you can get that information.
Yeah, so as we move forward with having more parent forums, there will be parent forums will continue for special education families. Parent forums will be run by Kelly Jones in the bilingual department, and also with the parent forums, the school committee will continue to run as we go through August and into September. So again, we want to make sure we continue to communicate and provide the forum for our parents to continuously provide us feedback. Jess, the email is reopening
It's
at
reopening
BPSMA.
at bpsma.org. I'm also going to add it to the live chat right now. So anyone whose questions were not answered, or if they feel like any questions weren't adequately answered, they should absolutely follow up.
Yeah, we want to make sure parents, you send us an answer, we will make sure, a question, we will make sure it gets answered within 24 hours. That's something that we make sure we do. Most of the time, it's a lot sooner than 24 hours, but we want to make sure that we're continually answering your questions. Again, any questions, please send to the reopening at bpsma.org. That's the email address. We will also have on our website a phone number for you to call to get information. And if you have a question about special education, bilingual education, social emotional support, TAG, you'll be able to actually, call the number, and that person will direct you to the person that will either, be there to pick up the phone or call you back with answers to your questions, so you actually can talk to somebody rather than just sending emails. We'll also have a phone number where parents can call and actually speak to the people that are in charge of each one of those areas. Transportation as well. Facilities, if people have questions about buildings and the cleaning procedures or the ventilation, those kind of things, there'll be some in the facilities to Dr. Cobb's would be available to answer those questions. So whatever question you have pertaining to reopening, guidelines that we need to follow, there'll be someone to answer those questions for you. All righty, I think anybody else can.
Comments or questions from any member of the committee? And I would also like to, in addition to the reopening email address, you have your school committee member also as a resource here as well. We're happy to answer any questions and hear any feedback or comment that anyone has, any parents have, or students even. We want to, get as much feedback and input as we can on this, and have that ongoing dialogue. So, okay. Also, I want to make sure that I thank Jess for all of her work and putting this together this evening. I have to say, I reached out to her early this morning just to, kind of see what, where things stood, and it was all set, and she was well on top of it as always. So really appreciate that. And Melinda, who makes sure all of our meetings are booked and ready to go, and that we have all our materials. So thank you. And thank you to all the parents who sent in questions and watched tonight and, asked questions on the live chat. We really appreciate that too. Unless any member of the committee has a comment, then we will maybe take a 5-minute recess and then come back to policy. Okay. Oh, you're staying there? Okay, all right. Okay, so we need to go back into our policy subcommittee. So first thing I'll need is somebody to make a motion to reopen the policy subcommittee. We have a motion to reopen by Mr. Minicello, seconded by Mr. Sullivan. All in favor? Okay, policy is reopened. So, under the policy subcommittee meeting for the evening, we'll review the reopening draft plans. We'll talk about K-12 transportation guidance, facilities and operations guidance, and the final item would be other business. And again, I want to thank BCA for being here this evening, going extended innings with us. They were here for the parent forum, and so, and also we learned that we had 1,000 people join us for the parent forum. That's great. Really appreciate that that level of engagement. The more feedback we can get, the better that we can make a better decision and address the concerns that people have. So with that, I'll turn the time over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. DiAugustino. So I'm going to quickly wrap up. Mic on. I'm going to go through a lot of this. We went through through the with the parent forum. Obviously, we started a reopen committee in early May with nearly 80 teachers, administrators, parents, school committee members. We're going to have students involved as well to write up the 3 plans that were dictated, required by the Department of Education, a full in-person plan, hybrid plan, and obviously a full remote plan. Those are due to the Department of Ed this Friday, the 31st. And then by Monday, August 10th, districts must finalize their plans and submit them to the Department of Education. So what we submit on Friday will be what we showed you as far as the options for the hybrid model. And then obviously we could pick what we do by the 10th. Obviously, after the 10th, we would be able to adjust depending on guidelines, depending on cases, depending on what's happening not only in the state, but also in the city. So the guiding organizations and frameworks for our work, obviously safety, following the reopening guidance that comes out from the Department of Ed, CDC guidelines and recommendations, the Brockton Board of Health recommendations. Linda Cahill is on our reopening committee. Obviously the reopening committee, and then our staff and parent and guardian feedback. Equity, we make sure we're obviously following the Common Core curriculum and frameworks, the Office of Teaching and Learning with their pacing guides and standards, curriculum trajectories, and then mass SPED guidelines that have come out from the Department of Ed. What's not here, which should have been added, and I apologize, is guidelines for bilingual education, English language learners, and obviously social emotional support for our students. And that's obviously one of our major guiding principles as we go into the school year, how we're supporting our students. The feasibility study, I'm going to let Dr. Cobbs, his team and facilities did the original feasibility study. This has to be submitted with the full in-person plan, so we had to do a study of all our buildings. So I'll let Dr. Cobbs go through these slides.
Okay, so you can see essentially what we started with was the 3-foot spacing for each building. We had the principals and their staff go around and actually measure each classroom, tell us how many classrooms that they wanted to use, and then by the square foot recommendations for the state, we determined how many students could fit in that classroom. And as you can see, with 3-foot spacing, we could pretty much put the students back in the classroom that were initially there, because most of our classrooms are between 28 to 30 students in some of the larger classrooms. Obviously, with the new standard of what we rule of thumb for 6 feet spacing, it pretty much cuts in half what the spacing will be and the number of students that can be in the building at any one time. Which obviously for the district-wide, that means essentially we can only have half of the students in school at any given day, any time. So that takes us from, from 12 to 30 students per classroom to 8 to 15 students per classroom, across the district. Sorry? Yep, that's right.
All right, so basically, first I want to thank the facilities department. I also want to thank our teachers and staff. They came in they have been coming, they could still come in to basically get their classrooms to remove. What we had to do is remove a lot of furniture and clutter that are usually in classrooms that help support learning and make it warm space. Obviously, to open up space for social distancing, we wanted to make sure that we had a clear out, obviously, shared tables, kidney-shaped tables, horseshoe tables where students meet together. Those are the kind of things we were able to get out of the classroom. We stored those in the gymnasiums. Again, teachers came in to pretty much take home things that they thought they could take home and just to open up extra spacing. So I want to thank the facilities department and also our teachers and support staff and administrators for working quickly to go into the buildings and identify things that we could take out of the classrooms, obviously to open up space. And here's the limitations for obviously another reason. Again, we went to 6 feet because of safety, but we have to remember that we eliminated 64 teaching positions. Another reason, and we will put this clearly in our reopening plan that we submit to the Department of Ed on Friday, and the commissioner does want to hear this, we could not open, even if we wanted to full in-person teaching. We do not have the positions. We do not have the teachers, the MTAs, or the paras to put into classrooms. Again, we are still down 64 teaching positions, and we have to wait to see what the budget says when we finally get one. But we would not, even if we wanted to, be able to open our schools and have a teacher in every classroom. We will also begin the year with 18 fewer buses due to the budget constraints, and also with the limit on 23 on a bus. It limits how much we can transport, another reason why we can't start in person. And our technology needs obviously need to be addressed to make sure our students have one-to-one devices, and also work with our families to make sure they have internet access at home. And that's we continue to work on that. It's not an easy solution because it's all about funding. So hopefully the money comes in from the Department of Ed. Not only is that grant for computers, it's also for help with internet access for families. And we also have, I think we put through about close to 9,000 laptops to be purchased through the CARES Act money through the Plymouth County. Again, in person, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's basically, there's something we have to submit. We went over this. There's 23 on a bus that we can put on. Jim, you met with First Students, so I'll let Jim jump in here. Because Jim, Tobias Cowens are basically, are working directly with First Student to make sure they're doing what they need to do to follow the guidelines. So I'll let Jim go.
Yeah, this is the challenge with First Student. We're trying to work with them to get their bus cleaning protocols, and when this was issued last week, we hadn't had a chance to go through it, and they hadn't. But essentially, what it does for Brockton Public Schools is we can put 1/3 of our students on any given bus at any time. Our typical bus route student, ridership is anywhere from 40 to 60 students. So that puts us with every run for every school, at least 2 buses, either one behind the other, or they have to turn around and come back and pick up the students again to bring them to school. So we're already at a deficit of 18 buses, and so figuring out how to do this, even with the reduced student populations, for each student's going to school half of a day, or one half of the week. We're transporting half of the students. We still have to break that in half again for each run. So the transportation is going to be a problem.
Me again? Obviously, drop-off routines have to be changed, not only for buses, but for walkers, for parents who are choosing to drive their children. As you know, meals are required, masks are required, no matter what grade students are in. This is another dilemma we have, is obviously, not only are we short on buses, we're asked to put monitors on buses to make sure students are wearing masks, and also make sure that we're following social distance guidelines, so students are jumping from seat to seat. Especially the way I acted on a bus. Yeah, so we have to make sure that they wouldn't be happy the way my behavior was on buses. So anyway, so we have to make sure, but that's money. That costs money to have monitors. And last year, the school committee supported that. We had monitors on all elementary buses going home for pretty much the whole, from September until the holiday break. And it really did help, because we have the rule that kindergarten and first graders cannot get off their bus at the end of the day without a parent present. And sometimes you have substitute bus drivers and things get mixed up, and sometimes a kindergarten student or a first grader is left off. So we wanted to make sure we had monitors on the buses. We did that last year. This year, right at this time, obviously the budget doesn't allow us to do that. So this is something that we we have to plan. And again, families departing immediately upon dismissal, basically making sure that it's a safe to and from school, not only in the parking lot, but for our walkers as well. This is the space. These are pictures of, obviously, classrooms. We switched out tables, went to desks. Again, thanks to the CARES Act money, thousands of desks were purchased. Tables have been removed, put into gymnasiums where they are now being, the tables, the legs are being taken off, and they'll be put into the warehouse space we are now leasing. Obviously, this is all good furniture. We have upgraded our furniture over the last 10 years. So nothing's being thrown out unless it's pretty much broken. So we will be storing all our tables and the bulky furniture into the warehouse that we're leasing, and obviously it will be kept there, obviously, whenever we're allowed to return to school in a normal fashion, but obviously there's no way that we were going to just throw out furniture. So plexiglass partitions, obviously in the main office and other office areas. We'll be working on other areas of the school. We work, again, Kim meets with me weekly. We met with, facilities today to make sure that there's, any other spots for plexiglass. Windows need to remain open, especially in exterior classroom and offices. And then, thanks to Dr. Cobbs, he was able to secure 200 air purifiers that will be put into the interior classrooms that do not have windows, again, through CARES Act money. We will put an order in for more of those, but 200 really gets us where we need to be for the interior classrooms to start, but we also will purchase more to make sure we have it. We want to get another 200. And that's important for those classrooms without windows. Dr. Cobbs and Ken Thompson are working on ventilation. That's part of the guidelines to make sure we have the proper air filters, making sure they're changed for our HVAC systems, for our univent systems, for those, if you go into the older classroom and we have the univents that are in the cabinets along the walls, places like the old West, East, they have those, Ashfield, Brookfield, those are all being cleaned out, vacuumed out, and those all will be cleaned as well. All the vents are being cleaned, taken down and cleaned by facilities department custodians. That's all being done and will be done before we open school. Again, what we need to do with high traffic areas is the constant cleaning and sanitizing of common areas, desks, hard surfaces, handrails, touchable surfaces, all will continue to be done throughout the school day. We are working with the custodians union to increase our staffing during the day. As you know, about 70% of our custodians are on the night shift. However, we are working with the custodians union. Obviously, we don't have money to hire more custodians, but we are working with them to switch some of our night people to work days, so we obviously get that extra coverage to sanitize during the day, which we're supposed to do. And obviously, we'll continue to clean, obviously every week with every day and weekday with the guidelines say, but we also will bring in teams on the weekends to do some deep cleaning as well, and continue to clean vents throughout the weekends. We talked about this. 3 masks, cloth masks, have been purchased for all students and staff members. Thousands of disposable paper masks available at every building for backups when a student or staff member forget theirs. Face shields available upon request. We bought over 3,000 of those. Gloves, sanitizing wipes, those we're waiting to get in. They're taking a little bit longer, but hand sanitizer dispensers are being installed in every classroom and common area. Those are touchless, so you put your hand underneath and the hand sanitizer comes out. They can be easily filled. So every classroom will have one of those, and we'll have bottles like the ones on our tables for backup. And then we talked about this earlier. Kim worked with Aldo to make sure we were able to order pens, pencils, crayons, pencil boxes, so students don't have to share those items. Again, the daily routines that schools will work on this, the reopening committee will work on this. It has to happen usually in each individual school with their teams there about how students will remain together in cohorts, how they're going to move through the building, how students will pass to specialists, how they'll get to cafeterias in a safe way. Again, stagger the bell, assign seating to make sure, obviously, if there's a positive case, we need to know the seating chart and who was sitting around the child or a staff member. So that's why seating charts and obviously documentation of that needs to be kept, well kept, and on file. Frequent mask breaks will have to happen throughout the day for students, as we all know from us wearing them. We need them often. Students will need them often. And there also has to be frequent hand washing throughout the day. Classrooms that do have the individual sinks, our plumbers have made sure they're working and ready to go. Some that do have individual sinks that haven't been used for 40 years won't be able to be used, so we'll have to, obviously, students be going to the bathroom for those. Some of the old piping has been removed, so there are some older buildings that do have sinks in the classrooms, but, they don't work, and we're not going to be able to get them to work for a variety of reasons, but we will have plenty of time for those classes to visit the hand washing stations and the bathrooms as well. And obviously, there'll be the hand sanitizer. And again, it has to be scheduled in for teachers and students to be able to wash their hands frequently. And also, so I'll let Sharon jump in because this is about, and she's been spending a lot of time with Laurie Mason about our special populations and how we're going to be supporting them.
So as you know, the students with disabilities, the expectation is obviously for them to be on site as much as possible. We also have to make sure that we're accommodating them in the ways that their IEPs identify to the best that we are able to. And that means the expectation is for especially students who are in sub-separate classes or with more severe disabilities, that they have more access to the school. The reality of that is it doesn't mean that every parent is going to want their child to have more access to the school, or that they will feel comfortable having them access the schools at all based on their health conditions. And so we have to work significantly with families to identify what they want for their children and how we can best provide those services for them. Students who are sheltered English immersion, there's a push for them to also have more services, which Kelly Jones and the bilingual department will work with schools and will work through the remote plan to ensure that those students also have greater access and opportunities for learning, and that we will work with families with our bilingual liaisons and others to make sure that they understand the options and understand how to access all of the services that the district provides while the children are at school and while they're learning remotely.
And Kelly Jones and Laurie will be back to speak to you again, obviously, a few times before we open school and also after we open school, to obviously keep you updated on our special education and bilingual education students.
And it's not up here, but I do want to point out the mental health concerns of children, especially during this time. There is indications that the mental health needs of students, of young people, is on the increase. And about 80% of the services for mental health that children get, they access them at school. And so our school adjustment counselors are vital to this work. And so we are, again, as you know, we had a phone call center. We have SACs working this summer to make sure that people still have access to those support services. And we will continue to find both while they're at school, because their time at school will be limited, we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that they need to also be able to access their school adjustment counselors while they're on site, as well as be able to support them remotely.
Obviously, to support the health and safety of our staff and students, we will not be allowing outside guests into obviously into the building during the day. That business would have to be done, during, at the windows that have been built at each school for safety and security. So that there'll be obviously the plexiglass or glass barrier between people visiting the school and doing what they need to do to dismiss their child. That would stay at all times, and we also have installed plexiglass at the main offices, at the counters. All staff and department meetings will be held via Microsoft Teams or Zoom until further notice. Obviously, they'll know I won't have the good fortune of being able to do a convocation and and come up with new music to play for our staff in the first day of school. So that's not going to happen, obviously. I'll have to do something remotely. Obviously, our special ed department will continue to offer Teams meetings in a virtual or remote format for special education parents. So we'll continue to try to do as much as we can remotely with our parents or visitors to make sure that, obviously we are keeping everybody safe. Is this the next one? Jesus, change that quick. All right, so obviously transportation, staff and transportation providers will be trained to identify the signs of COVID-19, and then symptoms, students or staff showing symptoms obviously will be discreetly referred to the nurse's office. This is for staff as well. We have to make sure that they're able to have a safe place to go discreetly. Each school will have a designated, which we have to have, as a medical waiting room with ventilation for students, again, or staff that are showing symptoms of COVID-19. And then obviously, if a student is exhibiting those symptoms of COVID-19, they won't be allowed, obviously, to take the bus home. And a staff member or student who leaves school due to COVID-19 must test negative prior to returning back to school. And again, we went over this in the screening that has to take place, and what we will continue to work with our parents, continue to work with the Board of Health to keep parents and staff updated on the symptoms, what to look for, and how to identify it, and obviously reinforce the importance of good hygiene, mask safety, hand washing, covering coughs and sneezes, and closely follow the state's restrictions for out-of-state travel. And how we're going to respond. Again, thankfully, the Department of Ed has put out guidelines, and we have the Board of Health to go by, and all superintendents were saying this to the commissioner, that this is not a snow day. You just can't leave it up to the superintendent to decide whether they should delay school or cancel school. There have to be clear guidelines and protocols that have to be followed when you decide to cancel school or send kids home during the day because of COVID-19. It can't just be, you're guessing what to do. You have to follow specific guidelines. So we will follow, obviously identifying close contacts, obviously work with the Board of Health to who we have to notify, who's been in close contact. We will follow clear guidelines. Students must remain home for 14 days after being identified as being close contact. Again, we'll have Dr. Herman come back before the school year opens to make sure that the guidelines we have in place, that they haven't changed. He keeps us updated, and obviously these could change as we get closer to the school year. So I know that we've gone, so June, do you have, yeah, but I'd like to, this is part I'd like to open up to questions just to discuss, the hybrid models that, or any suggestions you have, school committee, for hybrid models, or, I just want to make sure everybody's clear on, the hybrid models that would be in draft form presented to the Department of Education. And again, we get to select what we want, and that could change before we open school. Yeah, you can take that.
So it gives me a chance to use a different mask and redeem myself a little bit. I have to say that it just did really well. I was presenting. It made me think about how wearing a mask really does change your experience, and getting used to that is going to be really important for teachers who have to wear masks for a prolonged period of time. So it gave me a chance to connect with that and think about how much professional learning time teachers will need to be able to prepare for that experience. And so back to placing students in groups, again, we went through this during the parent meeting, but we are talking about splitting them up between two teams, green and orange, and thinking about keeping household members together, as the superintendent went into detail about during the last meeting. Sharon talked about the special education department and how important it's going to be for them to make decisions about additional cohorts based upon individual student needs that are, again, going to be informed by parent-guardian preference and health guidelines. And so the other thing that we thought about just on the prior slide is that we'll have to go back and think at some point about grouping and about looking closely at the demographic breakdown for each group to make sure that we have equal representation across the cohorts and across all of our schools. And again, this was informed by a survey question or survey questions that Jess put out a couple of weeks ago. And it was also informed by some of the work that's coming out of the district reopening team. And so with option one, we're talking about a schedule that rotates week to week. With option two, we're talking about the same 2 days for each cohort. So it's either Tuesday, Thursday, or Wednesday, Friday, with the Monday being a rotating day week to week. And the only difference between option two and option three is that Monday would be a full day of school, and that for option three, Monday would be a half a day of school. And again, we wanted to make sure that we had a visual representation for families to look at. And
I changed it. It was going to be a blue group and orange group. I changed it the last minute to orange and green, so that's why the green group's still in blue.
Oh.
That's my fault.
The only reason why I didn't recommend changing the background on the green group
She
is
didn't have to
because
have it changed, so don't blame
the green is very hard to read on the
Oh,
screen.
yeah.
So that's why it's right now.
So I see. And we talked about the difference between doing A week and B week, and that's why we renamed the group so that we could make sure that there was some clarity. So green group, blue group is really green group. I see what you did there, Superintendent Thomas. Yes, thank you. All right, so that's option one. And again, all of this was informed by parental input. And something that we talked about today is if you look at option one, even though it looks like that was the option selected by the majority of respondents. Option 2 and 3 are really equivalent to option 1, and those two options are very closely aligned with each other. The only difference being that Monday is either a half day or a full day. And so we'll have to put that out once again at some point to ask parents to, if we get to a point where you would like us to get more input from families, we could put out 2 final options.
Parents did ask, a couple parents in the reopening committee did ask about 1 week on, 1 week off. Some suburban districts are doing that. We did not recommend that because that is a long time for our students to be away from their teacher, a whole week, especially for our younger elementary students to basically come in. Is almost like every Monday, every other Monday, you would be starting a new school year almost with some of our younger students. So I know that, and the reason the parents, she's great on our committee, and she brought that up because of childcare. It's easier for a parent to plan from week to week for childcare. And that's why option 2, we figured, that was an option. Option 2, even though, it's without the every other day is option 1 where it would rotate. So 1 week you'd be in school Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the next week Tuesday, Thursday, then it would swap. And the reason why we went to option 2 was something we could think about is that the child, other than Monday, which would rotate, you would have, for childcare, you would know that on Wednesday, Friday every week, my child's going to be in school. And every Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday, you'll be in school. And then you would have to plan for just that rotating Monday. So that was, again, another option just to think about the childcare. The every other day was obviously something that we worked on to make sure we increase the in-person time that students had in front of their teachers.
And beyond that, just thinking about, and we already talked a little bit about this, but allowing us to provide students with breakfast and lunch to take home every other day. And so that would be consistent. And then importantly, ensuring students aren't going multiple days or, as the superintendent just mentioned, over a week without any in-person instruction. So the Monday half-day in option 3, one of the reasons that we proposed that was it provides the faculty with what we believe is going to be necessary time for professional learning to perfect this new model, and that would be especially true early on as we're adopting a new learning management system and we're getting faculty comfortable with using the resources that we've adopted both in the spring and over the summer to be able to transition that to both an in-person and remote environment. And in the event that we have to go fully remote, we're giving them lots of time to prepare for that. And then again, Dale.
If that was a model that you considered, I would think that we would only do that for part of the school year. Again, when you're having students in school every other day or on a short schedule, sometimes it's really hard to sell to parents in the community that you have a half day. It's like, okay, my child's not in school a lot. I'd like that. They're going to come on Monday. I want them there for a full day. So we have to take that into consideration. It does allow us time with teachers to do some work. However, we do have to take into consideration. We do have to take into consideration that, a half day is an inconvenience to parents. So that has to obviously be thought about.
And if the half-day, again, is remote or full, because if we went with the half-day remote, obviously, it would be still offering our students the hybrid schedule, so they would be engaged in work on that Monday. And I think that is a great compromise, the idea of maybe just starting off the school year like that and sort of having a time where we know that that's going to end, because of front-loading the professional learning is going to be tremendously important for our teachers. And so in line with that, the district's adopting and is going to be implementing a new learning management system. That'll be something that we come to you, I think, within the next couple of weeks to present to you so that you can get an idea and our families can get an idea of what that learning management system is going to be able to provide for our students in a remote or totally remote learning environment, or whether or not it's hybrid, and really the learning management system lends itself to in-school types of learning opportunities for our students. Students will be required to log on at the start of the school day. I know the superintendent talked a little bit about this. Participation and attendance is going to be required, not only by the district, but by the state. They've definitely put those guidelines out to us and made that mandatory, whether or not it is in-person or remote. And daily work, again, clearly detailed in the learning management system. And I think Ethan had talked a little bit about the fact that with the learning management system that will start off right at the beginning of the school year, specifically with the elementary students, will give parents an opportunity to go to one place where everything will be basically their classroom, and they'll have a single log on. And again, we'll be coming to you hopefully within the next couple of weeks to present that learning management system once we make our final decision and move forward with the vendor that we're hoping to move forward with. And work will be graded, so with the district's existing grading policies, very different than what we did during the spring closure. And as far as a totally remote learning model, we've definitely had numerous parents reaching out through the Brockton Public Schools, the superintendent's website, and to Jess, asking for this opportunity. And something that we thought that was important is that we targeted 3 distinct audiences, and one will be students whose families right off the bat decide that they want only to participate in a virtual learning program. And we have a couple of different options for the way that is going to look. And once we have more guidance from the state's looking to partner with, possibly partner with an outside vendor. That's not something, and I know that Mike already mentioned this, that we're looking to do. So we will be working toward being able to provide a fully virtual learning program through our own district and with the support of our teachers. And we also have to be prepared for the possibility and even the probability that we're going to have to rapidly switch to a remote learning model, because students and our teachers might be asked to self-isolate, and this will only be one classroom, or it could be an entire school, only for a short period of time, so for up to 2 weeks. And in that event, we want to be well prepared to be able to, for our teachers to support students in the event that they're quarantined or asked to self-isolate, and vice versa for our students, so that they can continue to be connected to what's happening in their classrooms. And then finally, we are going to, or we're possibly going to have students and staff who need to rapidly switch to a remote learning environment for an extended period of time. And again, we want to be able to make sure that we're providing a consistent learning model and learning experience for our students. And so our virtual learning program will provide full remote learning option to families who would prefer to keep their children home. And again, we know that that is a probability. We've had several inquiries from quite a few families who are interested in that option. We want to be sure that our virtual learning program begins on the first day of school, so those students will be engaged in learning just like the rest of the students in our school district. Enrollment information will be disseminated in mid-August. We think that by then we'll have clearer guidance from the state, and we'll have a better idea about how we can utilize our own staff to support a virtual learning environment. We know that technology and social emotional supports have to be available to those students who choose to remain at home. And so they, just like any Brockton Public Schools students, will be offered that extended support. And then finally, the same as our grading policies, whether it's hybrid or it's in person, the expectation will be that the students enrolled in the virtual learning program will follow the district's grading policies. So as we talk about short or long-term transition to remote learning, we've already mentioned that There will be an expectation that students are expected to log on to their remote learning platforms at whatever time of day their school would normally start, and that teachers will have sent instructions through the learning management system that they're utilizing at whichever level the students are in. And so long-term transition, students may provide live instruction. You're probably hearing this word a lot, synchronous. Synchronous means we're all together. And it's via a video conferencing platform. Again, those are the kinds of things that we need to work with our teachers on so that they're comfortable using a video conferencing platform, whichever one we decide to go with. And the same thing for pre-recorded instruction through the type of learning opportunities or teaching models that we call asynchronous. And so during a short or long-term closure, students will, as I mentioned, will be required to be in attendance every day. Whichever model that is, there is an expectation that attendance will be taken. And we mentioned that grading will be consistent with the district's existing grading policies. And so they're preparing for a rapid switch. Mike, do you want to talk about this, or do you want me to go through this?
What is this one?
So it's about putting a plan in place for
Yep.
emergency child care. Again, the superintendent mentioned that we are in conversation with the Y, and I know he's talked to somebody in the Boys and Girls Club to be able to partner. So if a student were in school on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, is there an opportunity for us to partner with the Y so that there's not only child care available on Tuesday, Thursday, but extending that to partnering with an organization that are able to support our students through what the expectation is going to be for remote learning. So it's not just attending a child care facility, but it's also about what's happening during those 2 days where the students, 2 or 3 days where our students might be in that child care facility. Having a close partnership will allow us to provide let's just for instance, if it was the Y staff or Boys and Girls Club, with support so that they are able to best support our students. And things like, again, BPS login information, day one, those are the kinds of things that our families, I think, reached out quite a bit to us about. Having teachers' email addresses on file, participating in online training for all remote learning resources, and all that information will be forthcoming within the next couple of weeks. And very importantly is keeping contact information up to date with the Parent Information Center. And I know Marcia will come and talk to you about some of what she's put into place to be able to make that an easier process for our families. And finally, communicating technology needs to the Brockton Public Schools Help Desk. The faculty staff are doing something that mirrors what we're asking our families to do. Participating in professional learning at the start of the school year. And thankfully, the department has worked through that with the MTA, AFT, and Boston Teachers Union and come up with what we think is a reasonable plan in allowing us to have up to 10 or 11 days of professional learning right at the start of the school year. Same thing as far as asking our families, keep up to date with contact information, making sure that we have email addresses for our students. And again, our learning management system is going to make this a much simpler process. Younger students, BPS login information. To take it a step further, we plan to work directly with our families once a learning management system is established to give them the professional learning opportunities that they will need, not the professional, but learning opportunities that they will need to be able to support their students at home to engage with some of the new resources that we're hoping to make available within the next few weeks. And then again, technology needs to the BPS help desk is going to be really important. And
So obviously, we'll notify students, staff, changes by our phone, text message system. We also get information out through our website, Facebook, and Twitter, as always. That's why we continue to make sure parents are signed up for our text message system. We'll continue to push that, continue to make sure that we have the updated contact information so we're able to communicate and notify people quickly when things are changing or if decisions have to be made. And then obviously we can sit, turn that off, and have a discussion.
So I'm sure we all have questions. Who wants to? Anybody? Ms. Asak.
Thank you for the presentation. And thank you for everyone's hard work putting together some of these plans that we're reviewing. I do have a quick question. So I noticed that on one of the slides, it says they need to follow the state's restrictions for out-of-state travel. So can we put something in one of the plans as far as any parents that plan on traveling, whether it's parents, staff, that we need to be notified? And how are they going to self-quarantine for 14 days? How is that going to affect students that are leaving out of state, especially near the holidays? Have we thought about that?
It's good that Ashley Sharon is working with our attorneys to update, there'll be an addendum to our handbook that actually will have that information. Obviously, we'll let parents know that that addendum could change. We'll also be updating that when guidance changes. Obviously, if the governor changes the out-of-state travel, obviously we'll have to pretty much try to monitor as close as we can any travelers out of state for those states identified as, I think just the New England states where I think we're okay.
He changed it last week, it was New England and the tri-states, but then he changed it again last Friday.
So, yeah, so basically we'll have to ask people, obviously it's not something, we don't have anybody sitting at the airports or the train stations finding people that are coming back, but we'll have to ask for obviously honesty and people to be, we can put that in the handbook that if you're out for a number period of days and we have to ask if you had any out-of-state travel. So that's all things that we'll have to put in the addendum to our handbook. It will be an addendum, handbook addendum related strictly to COVID-19.
Okay.
But you're right, it's something that we're gonna have to try to monitor as best we can.
I'm
without-
finding a lot of people are just not being very forthcoming, and I'm finding that in just other areas, not just the schools. In my own business, just people don't realize how dangerous it is, especially if they're flying. So they just have to keep everyone, just be considerate pretty much, and just keep us informed, as, this could shut down our schools. So if we can just keep an eye on that. And then, have we figured anything out as far as elections come September?
Yeah, I actually can go over that with,
Okay.
when we get to when I get to other business and I present the change in the district calendar proposal, I'll address that.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all, Ms. Asak? Okay, all right. Would anybody else? Mrs. Sullivan?
I just wanted to thank everybody that was involved in this, and got a really hard work. And I think we covered everything, but I'm sure other people have questions. And if they do, we did provide the email address for further questions, so I think it was a really great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. Any other?
Sorry,
Ms. Asak?
I forgot to ask. So I know the feedback I've been getting is a lot of parents would prefer to just keep their children home. But they're also concerned with their work schedules. So I know during the presentation, you had talked about maybe working with the Boys and Girls Club and other resources that we might have. If we can just really focus on that, because that's where I'm seeing a lot of my constituents are leaning. That's where they are, as far as they'd rather play it safe and have control of making sure that their children and their family is safe. But a lot of times, if they have to work, where are these locations if they had to?
Yeah, so once we vote on a decision next week, obviously subject to change, but we can then start to reach out to families to have them let us know. So we can start to identify the families, the students by grade level, so we can start to work on, obviously, our full remote plan for them. That's going to take time, so we got to make sure that's put in place, so we pretty much would start, pretty much to the middle of next week, we would start right away. Jess would come up with a mechanism to have families report. That would have to be a form they would fill out. Obviously, we need to know the child's name, the grade, the school they attend, and if they choose to, keep them remote. We'll also have, obviously, a deadline for them if they change their mind. We'd have to have a deadline of a date where they would have to tell us whether they're going to be, remote. And we would have them tell us that first, but we'd give them a little bit of a, grace period to change, but obviously would have to be made before the first day of school. So, but we would start getting that information pretty much by the middle of next week.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of planning. There's a lot that goes into educating these students. Again, we're going to try to do as much as we can with our own staff. So it's important for us to start building what that looks like, and making sure we can handle the numbers. Because again, we're going to try to do as much as we can with our own staff, but if the numbers are, if we end up with 2,000 students on full remote, and we're going to have to figure out what the caseload for teachers are and how we can manage that. So there's a lot of planning that goes into it. So I am glad that the state gave the extra 10 days, because there's a lot of work that goes into that.
It's definitely a lot of work, and it's a lot of unknown.
Yep.
And we're trying to plan something not knowing a
Exactly.
lot of questions that we have, which is very difficult. The only concern I do have is leave the windows open in the wintertime?
Well, it says as much as possible.
Okay, 'cause
So-
I mean, there goes our heating bill, and
Oh,
they're
yeah.
gonna end up getting sick if our windows are open and it's cold in the classrooms.
So you'd have to basically manage, what the temperatures are, and I'd say if it's obviously gets to temperatures that are below, 40 and 30, then I would say the windows would have to get closed up. But I think, it probably, would be throughout, when we go into the night and do our cleanings, that would be good for when the heat's down, for the custodians to keep them open for a little while, even if it is really cold, just to air the place out and then close them before they leave for the night. So those are practices we'll be working on with Dr. Cobbs in the facilities department.
Okay. No, again, I'm just asking those questions because I
Oh, no,
know
that's what
I've
we're
been
here
asked
for.
them.
That's
but
what we're
it's
here
just-
for.
Yeah, and I know everyone's been working hard on these different plans that we have, but it's just, again, we're going into the unknown. We're trying to plan something and not know, and they're giving us a deadline, so.
Yeah, I mean, a deadline's a deadline, but it's up to us as a district, and Commissioner Riley continues to say that. I mean, you have a deadline by the Department of Ed, which is August 10th, but this committee, we can make choices all the way up until the first day of school of how we open. That's clearly a district decision. It's made by the district. The Department of Ed presents you with guidelines, and then it's up to the district in the best interest of the students and staff with the number of cases. So each district, each city and town has to make their own decision how they come back to school. And again, that's, even though we'll vote on something next Tuesday, they'll obviously put in a motion that, this could be changed, and then we have to submit a final plan to the Department of Ed by the 10th of August, which then could change before we get to the middle of September. So that's something we'll continue to be very open and transparent about, that we'll continue to put out there in our message, and that this all could change.
But we're at
We're
least
talking about
prepared.
tonight could all change by next week, so.
But I think we're definitely a lot more prepared than we were when this first happened. Now, we
Oh,
are,
absolutely, yeah.
we're definitely a lot more prepared. We're getting ready if we have to do the remote learning. Again, we're getting our students and our staff ready.
But what we're not prepared for is a bad budget. So I want, we need to continue to say that, and remember that we need the state to come through with a level services budget, not level funded, level services, to be able to make this happen. It's a lot of money that goes into remote learning. There's a lot of training, there's a lot of, you have to buy a learning management system, which is money. You have to make sure we bring the 64 positions back. So we're planning all this, and we're doing it with a poor budget, so.
I do just want to share with you, I reached out to Congressman Steve Lynch today. Congressman texted me back. He does believe that the feds are gonna give us some money. He's been a great partner. I have good hopes that Beacon Hill's gonna give us money. They need to, but, Mike and I, and Aldo and Troy have been waiting for months. So, Congressman said it already passed the House side. He's waiting on the Senate. There'll be some jockeying there, but nonetheless, it'll be a trickle down. So Brockton will get some money. We don't know what the hard number is, but as soon as I know, I'll let you know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody involved in putting this program together. Like, this is,
And I'll email you the PowerPoint, so you have it all. Jess, can you email that to them? Yep, so everybody has it.
I just want to say that everybody did a great job putting it together. You broke it down to, unbelievable.
Thanks.
I don't think you missed anything.
I'm sure there's something in there we might have missed.
And Sharon, I just had one question for you about the special ed. I took it as the Department of Education wants the kids to come to school all the time. And that could change. In other words, the governor would have to change that? Or who would change that?
Education wants students with disabilities to be a priority and for them to be in school as much as possible.
So,
The reality is that parents, we have had some parents say they do not love their children every day. So we are developing a plan that will allow students with disabilities to be in school, accessing their services more often than the 2 days a week to accommodate those needs and to make sure that we are providing the services that are required to provide.
Sharon, basically what I was trying to say is, if COVID-19 spikes back up and the state shuts us down, then it doesn't matter. Everybody stays on.
If the school system shuts down, it shuts down forever.
Okay,
Yeah, no matter what, yep.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Ms. Mendez?
So I want to echo what a lot of people have been saying about the organization and everything put together. I'm also honored to be on the subcommittee of reopening. That I know that Brockton has consistently spoken about across levels with the mayor, with people that work in the Brockton public schools, and also with the school committee. Reading through the COVID-19 guidelines for the state, one huge thing that I was thinking about is they keep saying, like, when there's a student that has a case or a teacher, how to keep things discreetly, but then there's a designated medical space, and I feel like a lot of staff and children catch on to those things. And one biggest concern I have is bullying. When a student, is in a medical, and like if the parents can't pick them up and they have to wait there for the rest of the day, students are very perceptive, so that can be a huge problem with like the bullying piece. That's one thing I'm foreseeing. So how can we think creatively or build cultures where myself as an educator, kids are not very much educated with COVID, and then they use it as like, oh, you have COVID, don't touch me, don't, and it could be just like an isolating students per se.
Yeah,
So just-
exactly right. I was at a softball game for watching my niece, and I was watching the bench, and one kid coughed, and the other kids looked, oh, look, COVID, not, COVID, and that's exactly what Cynthia's talking about. That's something that, again, goes to training we have to do, and the culture that has to be set up, and it's a good idea. I mean, we might have to look to, even though there's limited space in schools, we might have to look to maybe rotate, if we're able to, that medical, the state, we're not using the state term for isolation room, we're using it as a identified medical room, not an isolation room, but I think that's as an excellent point, that we have to figure out how to maybe continue to adjust that or move it, so, students aren't identified and then bullying follows. Exactly right.
And then another question I had was in an equity piece about parents that have a child that may test positive. That child has to be quarantine for 10 days after taking the test if it's positive. How about if a parent is an essential worker? How are we going to work with parents who can't take sick days, especially 10 days, and the child doesn't have a caretaker, doesn't have, so things in that aspect. How are we going to support that family?
Is there,
Child is directly exposed, and that means the parent is directly exposed and should quarantine as well. I mean, the reality is, if your child is, if you're in a position where you know you've had direct exposure, for the safety of others, you're supposed to quarantine. So that should be a consideration of that family. Obviously, the child is going to learn, but to then be able to provide childcare and say, you can go back to work. If the child tested positive, and that parent was constantly around that child and exposed, and that parent is then taking that to the child. So I think that's one that would have to be kind of worked out, but ultimately, if we have a child who's being quarantined and they're living at home with the parent, that is going to impact that household.
is, Mayor, I know that they had, for first responders, they set up, do you think that'd be, the state would look for something of setting up for what Cynthia was talking, maybe some
We can
special
ask for a
daycare?
kid, but ultimately, they're not gonna, the state's not gonna provide childcare
Yeah.
for a sick kid so a essential worker could go to work. Because what Sharon just said is 100% accurate. Even if you don't test positive, if my kid's positive, I live in the house with the kid, I'm supposed to quarantine for 14 days. Because that's the contact tracing regimen, but I'll reach out to the
Yeah,
LG,
just to-
Lieutenant Governor tomorrow to see, because gateway poorer communities like Brockton and Lawrence and Lynn and Fitchburg, yeah, I mean, people working, I mean,
Yeah.
they need to, 2 or 3 jobs, so duly noted, great point.
Yep.
And, I'll see, because maybe Commissioner Riley hadn't thought about that as well.
Yeah, I know that he did bring up, and this has actually not anything to do with testing positive, but there have been talks between the commissioner and the unions about, allowing teachers. So if you taught in Norwood,
Yep.
and you have to now teach full-time, if you lived in Norwood and you teach full-time in Brockton, will Norwood allow your kids to go to school full-time? Like Cynthia, if she had school-age children, she teaches in Boston. So they're trying to see if they could work on an agreement between districts where, she's a Brockton resident, she has to teach in Boston every day, but her kids could come to school every day. So whether that has any traction or not, Kim might be able to jump in, because they've had I know she has some calls, but there has been talks with the commissioner about that, so you wouldn't be able to bring your child from, if you live in another town, to bring your child to come to work with you, to go full-time, because that's obviously not fair to the residents who are on a hybrid model, but the school district for where you live would allow them, and then we would do reciprocal for Brockton teachers who work in Brockton, like a Cynthia that goes to Boston, and their kids could go full-time. So that's been talks with the commissioner and the union presidents, but I don't know if that's going anywhere. So if there's any update to that, if I could let you know. But that has been a discussion.
And I guess my last question is, if caregiver cannot pick up during the day, they wait in a medical waiting room. How about if there's more than one child? Are we just gonna stack them all in there?
No, they'd have to be basically up to it'd have to be up to 6 feet of social distancing, and then obviously if it got to more, the nurses obviously would be trained and working with Linda Cahill, then we'd have an issue.
Okay, because we don't have the staff right now,
Nope,
right?
and we don't have,
That's
and
a
the
tough
space is
classroom.
limited. So these medical rooms, they're not like this.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're mostly small nurse's office or an office beside the nurse's office, so we've taken one of the offices in the guidance suite and make, have, because it's supposed to have an outside window. If it doesn't have an outside window, we have to do an air purifier. So again, we have old buildings, there's a lot of small places, so you're right, that's not, we're not set up well for that. So that would obviously have to be something that we would address, and it could be to the point where somebody's sitting outside with with a student. If it's a decent day, you'd have to sit out. If we had too many students in that area, we'd have to figure out. But again, with lack of staff, it's not an ideal situation. If we end up having more than 2 or 3 students that have to be in that situation, we would have an issue. So
All right.
maybe we can have the doctor return.
We've been also, Mike and I and all, yeah, well, Dr. Herman will come back,
Yeah.
absolutely. Whenever you guys want, he can come here. We've been talking with Troy Clarkson, CFO Brockton, and Aldo on the school side to also either rent or buy, you know, the trailers. You see the construction sites. Actually, some of the trailers we used at the Kennedy School, the Hancock, Brookfield, they're now part of the school. We're looking, because that's a valid expense.
Nope.
That's a valid expense under COVID, under the CARES Act. So again, we're getting, Jim Plouffe on the city side, Commissioner of Buildings, is also getting price points to see, because we might need to acquire some
Yeah,
of those.
so
or at
maybe
least
if
lease them.
we, I know it's hard, I don't think the modular classrooms were an option, but I think maybe the trailers.
Not for student use,
But for student, but we
administrative
can, yeah,
use or
that's a
anything
great-
else.
Trailers we could, yeah.
Yeah.
They'll make it the trailers.
We could, you know, the ones they put on construction sites with the manager, the guy
Yeah.
that never works, sits in.
Yeah, you can use them for, except for students' classroom space, you can, because they have to meet new fire code
Yeah,
standards.
you can't use them for classroom sake, but they can be used
Students.
for,
Like a waiting area.
yeah, that's important.
But for waiting rooms, or even you could use them for that medical waiting room. Or
Yeah, exactly.
anything
Yep.
else, or administrative uses.
Yep,
And I think that goes back to the culture then, because then the kids are gonna know that the kids.
that's the trailer.
You know that, you went to the trailer, you must have COVID. So it's kind of that educational piece, and that could be part of that 10-day
Absolutely.
training that we have with our educators. Like, how do we instill the culture where students are empathetic and sensitive to one another?
Absolutely.
Thank you, just some thoughts that I.
No, that's good, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have a few items of my own. So, when I was listening to some of the presentations, we talked about internet access for students, and I know that was being worked on. But what does that look like? I mean, are we working with Comcast to make that hotspot service available for free, or, you know, what do we
We
have?
still have through Title I, the hotspots, the actual hotspots that we're able to give families that they're able to have right at their homes. Like, you know, it looks like it looked like a beeper.
Yep.
The old beepers, and it has, you know, you can log on. We'll still continue to do that through Title I. I know that we've applied for a grant through the Department of Ed. They had $25 million out of the CARES Act money that was given to the Department of Ed strictly for computer, laptop, and internet access. So we obviously have a grant in through, you know, we have an application in through them. Aldo's looking for it through the CARES Act. That would hopefully pay for it up through December 31st. So, and also we're looking at, obviously, through Title I funds. So we'll continue to work to identify the families that need the internet access. I don't think Comcast is allowed to do a full, you know, it didn't work with city hotspots. It just wasn't something that was feasible. They did have plans in place, but some parents couldn't access it. So it was easier for us to secure it ourselves and then get the parents to hotspots.
All right, so we'll.
They're
be
called
able to-
MiFis, I'm sorry,
Right.
they're little MiFis.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the device, so we'll be able to continue that.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then also, I was curious, will there be PE? Gym class, physical education? Are we still, you know, if we were in a hybrid model, is there still going to be gym class? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, it would obviously be, there would be electives. Art, phys ed, music, health. Music has to be different. They can't, if they're gonna sing, they have to go outside. Probably not any playing of instruments anytime soon unless it's outside. That guidelines is clear. I'll make sure you get that. I don't know if I sent it yet. If there's phys ed, obviously in a hybrid model, you're gonna have, instead of, 50 kids in the gym, you'd have 25, and the teacher would have to do all activities that are non-contact sports. You're not gonna have basketball. You're gonna have mostly exercise, conditioning, running, all the fun things kids like. You're not gonna have flag football. You're not gonna have team sports until it's safe to do so. You're gonna pretty much do a lot of the conditioning, drills, those kind of things that obviously practice social distancing. And most of those classes, when we could, I was a phys ed teacher, and I did everything I could to get the students outside.
Right.
I mean, we'd be outside till Thanksgiving if we could. It's just so much better when you're
Yeah.
outside. So those, obviously, many of those classes will take place outside. Same with music. If we have to, if like Matt Cunningham is gonna have music class and they're gonna sing, they have to be outside.
Right.
And they have to be at least 14 feet apart. And that's the only way we're gonna have chorus, is
Right.
if it's outside. And that's unfortunate. If it's inside, you'd have to have in the auditorium, and it'd have to be spread out through the whole auditorium. And so
Right.
singing isn't something that is recommended inside, and with a lot of kids together. So another reason why, if we did full in-person, you would not see a lot of electives. They would have had to go into the classroom and teach in the classroom, which, again, with no singing,
Right.
how are you gonna do phys ed in a classroom? Another reason why, having a hybrid model in half the class, kids will be allowed to experience the elective courses. Obviously, a lot modified from what they were when we left school.
Right. Okay.
But it's important for them to have.
Yes. And then, can you just give me a little more, and I ask this because I've gotten calls asking about this, teacher safety and, how we're going to keep them safe. Obviously, we've talked a lot about opening and distancing to keep the kids safe, which obviously is important and a priority, but the teachers are also our employees and need to be kept safe too, so can you?
So absolutely, providing all the PPE equipment they need.
Yep.
If somebody does request more PPE equipment, then we would provide that. We do not ask teachers to buy anything on their own. So if a teacher asks, I really would like to have some plexiglass installed here or there, again, we're going to do our best to do that. We're not asking anybody to purchase things on their own. Some people do that anyway because they just want to feel, that their own, buying their own mask is more comfortable, or
Right.
their own supply. Obviously, they can do that, but we never want to ask our teachers or staff to buy things that is going to keep them safe. We'd rather do that ourselves. And then making sure we're providing them with all the, what do they call, Jim, MA, what's those sheets called that you have to supply for cleaning?
MSDA, the
The
material
MSD
safety
sheets
data
that
sheets,
provide
they've
what we're
actually
cleaning
changed, but-
everything, or making sure it kills COVID. So that's all provided on, whenever it's asked. The information on ventilation has to be provided, of what we're doing with our ventilation system, HVAC systems. Again, all the cleaning supplies we're using, what we're spraying out of the electrostatic guns, because some people have medical conditions when that stuff's around, when there's certain
Right.
cleaning supplies, so they need to know what we're using. So that's something you need to take into consideration. So a teacher might say, I might need more, if you're gonna spray my room down with the disinfectant, I might have to be out of there for longer than the 15 minutes it takes to drive. They might say, I need to be out of there for a half hour. So those are the things we're gonna have to try to work with staff, or when to disinfect rooms, and if people have allergies or medical conditions to certain cleaners, we need to make sure they know that. And again, providing the ventilation information they need, the air purifiers in the interior rooms where there's no, where there's no exterior window, those things. If there's plexiglass that people think we should be putting in, especially in science labs, those would obviously options and things we will do.
Okay, great, thank you. And I was also wondering, and again, just on the sheer numbers of kids coming into school, this may not be doable, but I know, like, when I drop my son off at daycare, there's a QR code I gotta scan with health questions about him. Is that something that maybe we could look at, or that would make sense for us to do as students are being dropped off, something, I don't know, something like that, where we can ask parents, and it's all recorded, through the app that they're scanning, so they have that record of every parent answering those questions every day. I don't know if that's something we could look at or do, or.
There's a ton of different, we get emailed stuff every day. We can look into different options, because there are apps for people's phones.
Yeah.
So Jess, we'll have to look into that about reporting, and there's a ton of different apps that are on, that we get emails all the time, so, and contacted by these companies, so we can obviously look into that.
Well, and then, Mrs. Sullivan makes a good point. That's if the parents are dropping the kid off, but kids that come on buses, then that would be a
Yeah,
different
it's going to be,
issue, so I
but
don't
there
know.
might be a way we can, if parents want to fill out forms, that we can keep information
Yeah.
through one of our apps, and
Right, I mean, just a thought, like I said,
Yeah.
but you also make a very good point. You know, maybe it's something that's done through email daily or
exactly,
something.
or just like doing it through an app or a online form.
Right, right. So, all right, and then, so my final thing, again, I just want to thank the reopening committee and everybody that worked on the presentations tonight, and again, thank Jess for all her work, putting all of the information together and the questions, but also, you've been the one managing the surveys and compiling all that data for us, so you have been very, very busy with all of this. So thank you so much for everything you're doing to
She's-
collect the information that we need, really.
It's tremendous.
You know, and I also want to thank the members of the committee that were on the reopening. I believe that was Mrs. Mendez and Ms. Asak, if I'm not mistaken, that were on reopening, and so I appreciate that. And that's it. I think, you know, other than that, we just need the state to give us a level services budget so we can actually pay for any of this.
I have a question from a parent. They're asking, I think we answered this question, but just so they can hear it, are we going to punish kids who refuse to wear a mask? What will be the protocols around that? And then, and this parent specifically thinking about disproportionately, thinking about students of color who get sent to the principal's office or get in trouble more, and they can foresee that a mask can be a problem if we're consistently sending kids to the main office.
It's not going to be something that should be penalized. We're not going to treat it that way. It needs to be, it can't be punitive. It has to be, we have to work with the students and the families. That's going to be part of our training. That's going to be part of our social and emotional support that we're going to be provided us, you know, with our families. We have to work with parents if a student's refusing to wear it, and it's basically have an open conversation with our parents to, talk about the safety and why you have to wear a mask, and the importance of keeping themselves and their peers and their teachers safe. So it's got to be handled in a support, not a punitive way.
But don't you think a great example was this past weekend, 6 different graduation ceremonies, and probably 98% of the graduates were wearing masks, and probably very similar in the crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, that was great. That was great. Could have been 99%, I don't know, but it was great, so.
And Cynthia, that point, that's why when we're with the 10 days in plan, not as only important about the social, emotional support and our adjustment counselors working with our teachers and with our administrators, and then also working with students and families. It's that the amount of mask breaks we give is going to be very important, because, if I'm a kid and I don't get the mask breaks I need, I am going to take my mask off. And I would have done that when I was a kid, because of like, you know what, I'm not wearing this thing for this long. You need to give me a break here. So that's why it's important to make sure that we have a clear, consistent schedule. And the teachers need time to take their masks off, and staff. So we have to make sure there's a clear, and there's plenty of times throughout the day that allow the students to be able to take their masks off safely, so it doesn't be, and that will help it not turn into an issue where it becomes a discipline matter. It can't become a discipline. It has to be working together, support, and then working with families. If it's really becomes a problem, then finding out what is the root of the problem and trying to get it fixed.
And can I just say, I came across a student, she's a recent graduate from Brockton, and the only reason why I knew that is because she was wearing this mask, Brockton 2020. So I'm like, oh, are you a recent graduate? Congratulations. She's like, yeah, I am, thank you. She's like, why do you have a mask? And we were able to talk about it. So just sensing the pride of having masks that say that they're Brocktonian or Brockton strong.
And the
So-
ones that we bought for the
Yeah.
district are Brockton, almost the same as this, it just doesn't have the 2020.
So I feel like that gives
Yeah.
students a sense of pride to wear the mask as well.
Absolutely. And I think as the schools get into the school year, and even though all the masks, we had to order them, just obviously to keep the price down, we ordered them the same. But I think each individual school will end up doing their own mascot and school colors as we go through, and again, a sense of pride, and that's also helps. But
can
it's
I
got to
add
be around
something?
support.
Can I ask something about that? So when we order masks, one thing that the Health Equity Task Force has been talking about is neighbor helping neighbor and empowering each other. When we order these masks, is there any way to order them in Brockton businesses, or where the money continues to stay here in Brockton with people that actually make masks here?
I think we do look well, obviously, we look for local
Well, the
first,
local
unless it
vendors is
has to-
WB Mason and Home Depot, some of the local vendors we are buying the
Yeah,
equipment from.
we try to always buy local first, and then if
Okay.
it obviously gets to a point where it's at a amount that has to go out to bid or go out for procurement laws, it doesn't allow us to, buy locally if it's not the best price or if it's not the bid price, but we always look in city first. for
Okay, like
anybody
small
that-
businesses, right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yep.
Does the policy subcommittee need to vote on something to recommend to the full committee? Is that the procedurally,
No, I mean, I don't
do we
think we
not
have
need to do that?
You could just take a vote, send it back favorable or unfavorable. I mean, under Robert's rules, you could definitely take it, you're not mandated, but it is
We
a
don't.
subcommittee, so you can send it back favorable to the.
Well, if we don't need to do that, then we can leave it till Tuesday. That way people have more time to digest.
Yeah,
I
I
just
think
wanted
there's
to
more
make
time
sure
to
that we
pick
weren't
to talk
procedurally
about,
gonna
if we do open
miss
hybrid,
something.
we have to
Okay.
pick a model
Okay.
for Tuesday night, but I think,
Yeah.
we have more time. I don't think you have to make a recommendation tonight. I think you take them into consideration. And again, the consideration for the three, do we want something that rotates where parents have to figure out,
Right.
well, is it Tuesday, Thursday this week, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or is it more, these are my set 2 days every week, and then only Monday would rotate?
Right, and
That's what we have to take into consideration.
definitely the tough part. But, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I didn't.
No, I think, again,
Procedurally, if
gives
we
you more
had to, I
time.
wanted to make sure we did it right, so.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other, Mr. Rodriguez?
Either a question or a statement, and the mayor can jump in. Our last meeting, Dr. Herman was here. He basically stated, in order for us to open, it depends on the data, where we are when that time comes. So, are we gonna have a magic number? Is it gonna be 500? Is it gonna be 1,000? Is it gonna be 2,000 cases, active cases in the city, where we determine that we're gonna open the school? So
Good
what
question.
type of, I mean, like the data, because I'm on the data
Yep.
subcommittee, and we've been asking for data, for quite a while since we started the task force. And one thing that doesn't, that I hope it does happen, is that the Board of Health actually shares the data with the school department. Because the actual data now is being shared with the police and fire for hot houses. So we have to take this in, with the data that's being shared with the, our first responders. My concern is that it should be with the school department as well, because these households do possibly have students that live there. And if that's not being shared with the school department,
Yeah, it can't be under HIPAA.
these kids can actually, come to school. And then comes the question with HIPAA. I mean, we do have, a nursing director that's actually running the Board of Health. The Board of Health can actually give that data to the nursing department here, where it's not being shared with the whole school department, because we have to make sure that every student that comes into the school is, safe and that they can actually return.
Yeah, a couple things. I don't think there's a magic number, and I've been saying it since day one, right? It's data-driven, 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 metrics, science. I'll give you an example. We were down to 59 active cases last week, right? Think about that, 59 active. We were up to 2,900 at one point. It's unbelievable, right? But when that 59 went up to 82, the state contacted my office, and as of yesterday, we are in the second round of the priority listings of the municipalities. So it's called Stop the Spread campaign. The first 8 municipalities, we weren't in it, but because there was an influx of, 30, we met that criteria. Now, 30 isn't a lot when you're talking about we're up to 2,900, we have 271 deaths, but to the state, it was a trend going in the wrong direction. For them, that was the data. So from now, as of yesterday to August 14th, there's increased testing around Brockton. BAMSI's gonna be involved, we're gonna be doing the high rises. The outdoor one is gonna be 3 full days, not half days anymore. So Tony, I mean, there is no magic number. I just think we have to see the trend. I think Dr. Herman should come back again next week,
Absolutely.
if you guys don't object. He's working on a dashboard that he did a draft version today that's gonna be going to the Health Equity Task Force, that's gonna be brilliant. But there is no magic number that DPH or MEMA has told us, like, hey, City of Brockton, if you go up by, 500, it's, code red. They haven't said that. But I will say that when it went up 30, that drew a red flag to them.
My concern is, with the data being shared with the our first responders, you have a 3-family home, somebody in there tests positive. There's 3 students that live in that home. Who's to say that they're not gonna jump on the bus and come to Brockton High School or the unknown school, if that's not being shared with the school department?
No, I'm with you, but our lawyers have already vetted it out, and what the state is saying is Governor Baker, he enhanced HIPAA with the caveat that the local Board of Health, Brockton's Board of Health, Easton's Board of Health, Bridgewater, can only tell a hot house, a house that has a positive, to first responders that may go to that property. So it's police and fire. We don't even tell Brewster Ambulance. But I agree with you. I mean, it's asinine, right? It should be shared, but it's not currently.
I'll ask the commissioner, in the
Yeah, ask
chat.
Riley. That'd be great.
We have him on tomorrow, so we can put it in the question box if the state is planning on, pushing us to, I'll have Ethan put it in the chat, just in case. So, no, I'm just kidding. No, I'll put it in the question box for the commissioner, because there's a lot of other superintendents have the same question about, identifying families or households that have it and how, the school should be notified. And, I'm sure Riley's meeting with the governor all the time, so hopefully that's something that they're talking about, but I'll put it in the box tomorrow for the commissioner.
Thank you.
Because it would be helpful to get it statewide. Absolutely.
Okay. Any other comment or question on this matter? All right, if it's all right, we can move on to item number 2, K-12 transportation.
I mean, we've pretty much covered under the PowerPoint, so I'm just, for 2 and 3, I'm happy to, answer any questions. Number 3, obviously, facilities. I am in talks with the Teamsters. Obviously, we have, as you know, 80% of our custodians work the second shift, which is the 2:30 to 10:30 shift. We're doing our best to maximize the coverage during the day. The good news is, in the custodian's contract, they are allowed on, when there's no school. In the summer, on vacations, night custodians can work days. That's been the practice, that's been in their contract for years. So about 90% of the night custodians work days when they have the opportunity. So we're looking to take advantage of that through, usually when school starts, they have to go back to their night shift because most of the cleaning has to be done at night in the normal circumstances. That's changed because there's pretty much not going to be hardly any after-school activity. So what we need is that staff to now come days, either the 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. shift or the 11 to 7 shift, depending on how we're going to staff each building. It will be per building. So we're working with the Teamsters on getting as much coverage during the day as possible to do the cleaning that is required during the day. So I will keep you updated on that.
If you could just clarify why it's the Teamsters Union. A lot of people think the Teamsters is just a truck.
Yeah, no, the Teamsters, thank you. The Teamsters represent the custodians. They also represent the first student bus drivers, which obviously we don't have, but it's the same Teamster, or it's the Teamsters 361. No, 653, I'm sorry, 653. They represent our custodians. They represent our school police as well. I think that's the 2 unions they represent with the school department, but they also represent the first student bus drivers in Brockton. So that's why I'm working with them.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's any other questions, again, for transportation. And again, I'm working with the Teamsters, with the first student through transportation guidelines. Dr. Cobbs is to make sure. So Dr. Cobbs and Tobias Cowens are pretty much in charge of making sure that all our bus providers, van and all our vendors, are following the guidelines, the cleaning procedures they need to follow, and everything that needs to be done through the vendors, because obviously we contract out all our transportation services. So they'll be in charge of monitoring and make sure they're doing what they need to do.
All right, anything under any other business?
Yes, I had the calendar. So, we just got notified last night of the agreement to go to the 170 days. So Kim and I met today. So this is my proposal to adjust the calendar. The teachers were scheduled to come back to work on September 1st. That would be a day they would return. We would keep that as a return date for teachers. That was going to be their first day back. But because of Election Day, that day they returned would be remote. So we would schedule their training remotely, so they are not in the buildings during Election Day. It doesn't look, obviously, that we're going to be able to change to have elections in different locations this quickly. Schools have been used for years. There are several schools that, I think 13 of our schools are used as polling locations. So obviously, we didn't want to lose that day as training, so we are suggesting that day, and obviously with getting ready for remote learning, we have a ton of training that can be done remotely. So obviously, for the safety of our staff and also for the people that are coming in to vote, then I would recommend that, obviously, that would be a work day for teachers, but it would be done remotely. And then teachers would be, all of us would be working, obviously, on the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. Now, the change in the 4th, last year, the 4th was going to be an off day, which is a Friday, for both. So basically, this was a year that we started school before Labor Day. And in the teacher's contract, we can't start until, they can't come back until the 1st of September. So it was September 1st, 2nd, 3rd. The 4th was supposed to be a day off. It's not going to be. As you know, students were supposed to return to school on the 2nd. They're not returning to school on the 2nd, obviously, now with the 10 days. So it would be a teacher workday remotely on the 1st, then they would be in working on the 2nd, they would be in working on the 3rd, and in working on the 4th. We would not take the 4th as a day off, because again, we don't have any students. So that would be 4 out of the 10 days provided by the state. Obviously, the 7th is Labor Day. We would everybody has that day off. And then we would have 4 professional development day. Again, teachers working the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th. That gives us a total of the 8 days. And then Monday, the 14th, and then Tuesday, the 15th would both be teacher work days, and that would be the 10 days. School, the first day of school for K to 12 would be the 16th. And the state says you have to start school by the 16th, otherwise you have to get a waiver. We will not need that waiver because we would be starting school by the 16th. And then the students would come 16th, 17th, and 18th, depending on how we come back to school. And then pre-K in kindergarten would be pushed off to start on the 21st.
So you mean 1 to 12 would be the...
1 to 12, yes. 1 to 12 would be the 16th, would be the first day of school, Wednesday, September 16th. And then the second day and third day of school would be the 17th and 18th, depending on the model we go with. And then the first day for pre-K and kindergarten would be the 21st, which they always start a little bit later anyway. So that would be the start of the school year. In the teacher's contract, they have an extra day, so with the 10 days of professional development, we actually have 11 days for teachers to work, because they have that one day they come back before the students. So we would have that one day, because we have work to do with getting students, teachers ready, working with our learning management system, working with our Office 365 and Teams. Kim and I would like to use that day sometime between August 1st and September 1st for those teachers to actually have to do mandatory remote training on one of our learning platforms. That basically gives us that extra day. Otherwise, we'd have to swap a day out somewhere else down the road. This allows us to gain 6 hours of professional development time before the end of the summer, and that would be the 11th day that is in the teacher's contract. So that's my proposal for that, and we would get you the information. Teachers actually would be remote training can be done. It would be mandatory. They would obviously report. We'd know who would do the training, but it would also, they wouldn't all be doing it on one day. They'd have to do it between a certain amount of time. And obviously Kim would work with Kathy Moran on that. And then June, Ethan, Cliff, Sharon, they'd be working on, what that 6-hour training would be on our, learning management system. It looks like it would be something, Office 365 and Teams, because that's something we can do immediately and it's ready to run. So that would be the day we would pick up. And then a trade-off for that, for teachers to work in the summer, is that we would have an off day on March 15th. So basically, March 15th would become, and that's a Monday, that would become a 3-day weekend for everyone, students and staff. And then the last day of school, that means the last day. Melinda, you give me one of those other ones? Sorry, I don't know what I do with it. Where the last day of school was June, it pushed the last day of school to I think from the 15th to the 16th, given that March. We picked that date because there's a long haul between February vacation and April vacation, and we figured that we don't know what's going to be going on at that time, and we figured it would be a good time to, have a day off for students and staff, kind of regroup. So if we took off, so it's not in here for, so if we took off the 15th of March, which would be the only day off in March, there'd be no other days off in March, so it would be Monday the 15th. It would push the last day of school from the 15th to the 16th, which is still really early for us. The last day of school for us is usually around the 18th or 19th. So I'll make sure you get all this information before Tuesday night, but I just wanted to present that tonight. I don't know if I missed anything or wasn't clear or anything, but that's pretty much what we would look at for. So basically, for everybody that's watching or still watching, the first day of school for students in grades 1 to 12 would be Wednesday, September 16th. And the first day of school for, again, if we're coming back to school in a hybrid model, that would be the first day of school, 1 to 12 would be this Wednesday, September 16th. And then the first day of school for pre-K and all kindergarten students would be Monday, September 21st. And then I would we will send this in Friday's packet, the color-coded that shows you all the days off throughout the year, which we had, a district calendar. Obviously, we have to update it. This is obviously I think the third or fourth time we've had to change the district calendar because a Marathon Monday changed, and so we could be changing this again before the end, so that's,
You have to be flexible.
yeah, so that's basically what we're looking at.
Also,
Yes.
June 19th.
If we go to June 9th, it's a good thing you said that. It's
It's
official now?
Saturday.
Did they finally, went all the way through?
Yep.
So, June 19th, we have to, Melinda, make sure if we do have snow days, we would have to then obviously, so they're gonna have to decide when it's probably gonna be, observed on that Friday, I would think. Because it's on a June 19th is on a Saturday. So they usually do it, if it's on a Saturday, they usually do it on the Friday. If it's on a Sunday, they usually do it on a Monday. So we would circle, obviously, and shade out the 18th. That would be Juneteenth, and then obviously we would not have a makeup day on that day. So if we get out on the 16th, and obviously if we had snow days, that would not be a snow day, that would be skipped over. And I'll double check it's gonna probably be recognized on the 18th. Usually that's how it goes. But thanks for pointing that out.
Anything else under other business?
Can the snow days be done remote?
Good question. We're gonna ask. Yeah, I don't know why I bet you they can be this year. They haven't given us that guidance yet, that's why we still have to build in the 175 instead of 170.
Riley, when you do them as little magic
Yeah,
questions.
Ethan will be on, yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
No snow days in the history.
Yeah, no more snow days ever. Yeah. That was the, what did they call it? The blizzard bags? There were districts piloting these blizzard bag. Obviously, there were districts that had funding, so that's why it was never fair. But now that we've all been forced to switch to remote learning, that's a great point. Tony, that's a great point. You might not have to I might not have to worry about, I'll call Steve, little flake flies will be calling school off. Oh, it looks like a little flurry out there. Go back to bed.
All right. Anything else? Do I hear a motion? Motion to adjourn, properly seconded. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, appreciate it.